All right, welcome everyone to August 12th, 2025. Our Crack Communication Shop has us live on social media and YouTube and around the globe. Hope everybody's having a good week. We're here for our monthly work session with the Athens-Clarke County Mayor and Commission. And we have 4 items on the agenda today. One that's for questions only around future considerations. And then we have 3 where we'll receive a presentation from a staff member. The item for future consideration is the West Broad and West Hancock neighborhood pedestrian improvements. You've got a presentation that's been provided to everyone and it's on the web. Folks would like to see that. We've got Diana Jackson with us from our SPLOST shop from Jacobs. And so I want to just ask commissioners, are there any questions that y'all have about this item?
Will we start?
Are there any questions?
We're not going through this one.
No, we're not going through this one. This is a questions only item.
I was like looking at that, because this is all these little streets, which is great. Harris Street, there's one, I'm like, that street looks so narrow. How is there gonna be any is there enough room to add a sidewalk and still have room for the?
We will be getting an engineering firm as part of this agenda report on board, and they will let us know. There might be some options we may look at with transportation and public works staff as maybe whether we one-way it.
Okay.
And have a parallel. So sorry to figure it all out.
Okay.
Yeah, I had the same concerns, because I remember when we wanted to put a sidewalk on Waddell Street, we had lots of outcry from residents on that street because they'd be taking part of their yard, taking down trees. And so I kind of wonder, I'm a little concerned about some of the priorities, because the things that I hear from folks in that neighborhood, is we need traffic calming on Evans Street, and that's been an issue for 30 years. Especially now with the Boys and Girls Club. So I wonder if there hasn't, any evaluation of that street didn't take place during that pickup, because when that pickup is going on, it's really scary. And the Harris Street thing, I just wonder if maybe traffic calming would be a better option for that instead of sidewalk. I hear, and also Paris Street, I hear a lot about cut through traffic and speed on Paris Street, which I fear is going to get even worse with construction. And I need to go back to all my work orders and inquiries about stuff in that neighborhood, but I can forward those and let you know what I'm hearing directly from constituents. I'd really like to see this go before the West Broad Advisory Group before we move forward on it. There is an active neighborhood group in that area. And I reached out to them this morning, hoping to get some kind of meeting where this can be presented to the folks who actually live in the neighborhood, so we can understand the priorities of the folks that actually live there.
Commissioner, I anticipate you probably got some direct connections there. It might be helpful for staff just to have that contact.
Okay, I will.
Right. Having residents that are on it.
Yeah, well,
They didn't speak to either of that, but they did bring up Evans Street, and that was added. It's a highly.
yeah, I noticed it's the second tier priority, but that has been a #1 priority I've heard for 10 years now.
Okay, because the other one I had heard about was trying to do something at Deering Extension.
Yeah,
Right there in front of the school.
yeah, that's definitely, yeah, that definitely is an issue. But I can, Tawana Maddox at the land trust.
I know Tawana.
Yeah,
Dr. Maddox.
connection with that. The land trust kind of quarterbacks that advisory group.
Anyone else? I'll echo that, anything that can be done for vehicular traffic on Evans Street, I think would be advantageous. For 4 years with my office overlooking Evans Street at that intersection of Waddell and supplemental work for another 4 years there. So I know that it does move fast. You got a lot of kids coming and going.
There was a little girl hitting Skill.
Staff will be working with me on some of another always stop that was thought of after this. So maybe I'll ask them to add maybe some traffic study for Evans Street also. Okay.
I mean, I've requested it over and over again, and it did undergo a analysis about 8 or 10 years. It didn't meet our standards then, but we've changed. Yeah, and a lot of the old folks who live there have passed away, and so kind of a neighborhood in transition, so there's some of the neighborhood leaders there are not around anymore.
That's a quick question, Commissioner Lang, because the neighborhood is changing, it's becoming more student oriented, is that what's happening? You think?
Well, student oriented, rental oriented, I mean, and that's another issue. It's a single family neighborhood. There should not be households of more than two unrelated people in that neighborhood. And that's Bob and I have talked about it. We really need to get an issue on how we treat our single family neighborhoods and how the impact of students on those neighborhoods, the impact they're having on lots of things, but on traffic and parking is the #1 issue.
Certainly, you've had a lot of just older folks who've kind of moved on to the Great Reward or gonna now in assisted living.
Yeah.
Their 10 years did. All right, any other questions? Thanks, Diana, appreciate it. All right, Josh Hawkins is up next and is gonna take us through some SPLOST process matters as we contemplate how we might get to better project delivery.
I'm still stuck on Great Reward.
It's
Peter. Oh.
There you go.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, so capital projects process overview. This is exciting stuff. Is everybody excited?
Yes. Oh,
Very good.
no, me too.
So I'm gonna talk, first of all, I know it's not August 9th. That says August 9th up there. It's obviously August 12th. Manager asked me to put together a presentation on the project delivery process for you all. I'm gonna talk for about 10 minutes. I'm gonna move through these slides, but not diving deep into these topics because I would imagine you came into the room with some thoughts to share. And I don't want to keep you waiting for those, but I did want to offer sort of two things here. Number one, to become more familiar with the current process as it is right now. And number two, to provide you with an opportunity to kind of share some of your concerns with us. And I want you to know we have been paying attention and we understand that there may be a desire to do probably two things. Number one is have a process that's faster. And number two, that's easier to understand. And we share those concerns. So I think the first thing I want to do is acknowledge that it is taking a long time and I can understand if it's hard to understand. What we want to do is put you in a position where you can make the kind of adjustments that you like. And one of the things I want to do today is to kind of offer a framework for thinking about it and focusing on the things that take time, the things that consume time in this process, and that maybe you control. There's some parts of the process that we don't have a whole lot of control over, but others that you may. And then after today, let me pause. I want to do all that though without offering any suggestions to you today. I want to hear what you want. And then we'll take that. And one of the things that I wanted after today, what we'd like to be able to do is take those preferences, combine them with some insights that we might gain from our upcoming operational analysis review. And then, of course, the manager's intent, and then to craft a process that is closer to what you all might want. The good news, though, I think, is that you'll find plenty of areas in the process that you have control where you can make a real difference here. So I'm going to start with this slide. I know you can't read it. So this was offered to me on day one when I started. So it's where I want to start with you all. And just follow me. You don't need to consume all this content on here. But one of the first things that caught my attention, if you can see it on your screen, I know you can't see it up there. There's a date in the bottom small print down there. It's March of 2004. This is the process, and it's kind of what we consider the base process that's been in place for 20 years. And there are variations. This one's architectural. There are others for, roads, checks. But I did want to show it to you. Who's seen this before, by the way? Has anybody seen this graphic before? Okay, so some of you, not all of you. So the first thing I'll point out is that, this has been in place and kind of the way that the SPLOST office has been instructed for 20 years.
This document can legally buy a drink downtown.
So, and we do still use it. There, later I'll show you a kind of updated version of it, but it is still useful to us from a staff perspective. The second thing that I'll point out to you on this graphic is at the top, you'll see kind of 4 phases: pre-design, design, bid and award, and construction. These phases exist regardless of whether we're talking about construction in the public sector, the private sector, Georgia, not Georgia. It's just what it takes to get things built. You might see different words in different places, but that work has to get done regardless. And I know a lot of us like to focus on construction. That's where the big bills are. That's where the big risk is. Those 3 phases ahead of it, if it helps to think of that as preparation. That's what we do. That's where we do our homework and all the things that are necessary so that construction is as successful as it can be. One of the things that helps me, it might be helpful to you, put it in a different context. I think of construction as game day. We all look forward to game day. It's exciting, you know, but think about all the preparation that has to happen for a Georgia football game to go well, all the work into practice and training. And, you know, there might be some corners that we can cut or shortcuts in that preparation phase, but, you know, game day construction will probably suffer if we take those shortcuts. So I wouldn't advise that, which is why we pay a lot of attention on those first 3 phases and then all the preparation that it takes so that construction goes well.
I have a quick question, just as an example, when we were just talking about the West Broad SPLOST project, which column is that one that we just talked about?
So you just saw a concept. So we would be, that's the pre-design. So
Far left.
let me actually do this. You'll see 3 black circles that just showed up. So those are the kind of check-in points, information on these projects. And that's first one right there, project concept. You just saw a concept.
Mhm.
So, and you know, that's a good transition here. Because after the referendum on any program, these projects might not be more than an idea. You know, it kind of gives us some parameters and we got to get it into shape. It's what the concept is, right? So it's kind of, this is the road we're headed down. We just want to make sure that's the road you want us headed down before we start spending money with professional designers in order to bring you schematic or preliminary plan, which would be the second circle right there, which would be the second thing that we would bring to you typically in a process. On a project for a vote. That last one is construction award, which is something that's required by statute. That's something that anywhere in Georgia, that's going to come to the governing authority for sure. So that one's required. I'm sorry, did I see?
I think you answered my question.
Okay.
On the second circle, is that where money starts exchanging?
So we're going to spend a little bit of money just developing the concept, but that
That's
one
my
mostly is a consumer of time. But yes, one of the reasons why it's a good idea to make sure, hey, we're about to spend some money on some professional design work, surveying, and the homework that it takes to build you a specific plan. And yes, so in between there is where we start to spend some money. What we want to avoid is spending that money, not the road you want us going down on the project. So that's how the 3D concept is. So that previous slide, that's what we kind of consider the base process. You'll hear me use that word, the base process. But of course, you know, even if I stop there, it's already complex. It's already fraught with sort of uncertainty and risks that we have to deal with throughout any construction project. Now, the next slide are some kind of layers of processes that you would typically see added on to that base layer. And each of them are a consumer of time. This isn't all of them. There are some that I chose not to include on here, but I have a lot of control over them. So I want to start kind of in the top left where it talks about user groups. I assume that everybody's heard the term user groups before. This is the technique that the manager's office uses to kind of bring in various stakeholders early in the process. So it's not just a staff effort, it's a mix typically of community members and staff trying to help this project take shape and to bring you a concept that we think you want. It does take time. Got to schedule these various folks that might want to meet in the evening, might want to meet in the morning, and then get them familiar enough with all the things they need to know to feel comfortable making a decision, come to a consensus, and then bring you whatever the next step is. So user groups is a consumer of time. It is a process on top of the base that I just showed you, and it's just something I want you to be aware of. There are probably, the last time I counted, there was about 40 different active user groups right now. So it does take project management time and certainly project timeline space as well.
The second, can I stop you for real quick on this user group? So for the life of me, since they've been around, I know Alan Reddish, the manager, appoints these, or their manager at the time appoints these user groups. And oftentimes they're mostly staff. So why are they necessary? Staff to get together during the day and talk.
I've been kind of putting together this history myself and trying to understand kind of how they've evolved.
So
I don't even.
if they're holding up things, then it's something to look at, change it.
Fair comment, we've considered that ourselves.
Well, I know you considered it, but are we going to do something about it? So that's why we're here.
If there's consensus that that's the direction you'd like for us to go, then certainly again, think of what we try to do is compare, okay, well, what was the purpose in the first place? And the purpose was bring in stakeholders early so that they can start to get involved. But if we feel like we can do that without a user, achieve the same outcome without that expenditure of time, then perhaps that's something to consider.
I'm going to second that motion. I know we're not voting, but I'm going to second that.
Well, and as we get through,
And I want to tell
we
him,
can say,
I want to tell him about I want to remind Josh of something though. That was the problem you faced with District 9 T-SPLOST folk. That is a typical, and I agree we need to move on, but the things that we can go ahead and check off our list, let's do it, because that is how it's redefined is one thing, how we fix it. But we need to go ahead and check off our list if we feel a need to speak up. That is the biggest issue for me.
Well received.
Hammond here, just.
but let's go through the rest of the presentation.
I was going to jump back. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
So, but we'll get to the end of the presentation because then we'll be able to say holistically, hey, what do we want to modify? What do we want to keep? What do we want to flush?
I'll roll through it, I promise, because I do want to get y'all's comments. So public engagement, listen, public engagement is important. We're talking about capital projects, which means we're talking about permanent changes in the environment. And, if you're going to be making changes in my neighborhood or along my commute, I'd like it if someone would come talk to me first. It does consume time though. Minimum of one round of public engagement is 60 days between developing it, having that window where it's out there, collecting it, and adapting whatever the plan is based on public engagement. Often it takes even longer than that. And this is an exercise that I can't really do concurrent with other steps in the process. I've got to develop what we want the public to engage on and then begin the engagement and then adapt. And typically what happens after public engagement is we're bringing you some sort of agenda item immediately after that. So we start the agenda cycle. So that's public engagement. It does consume time. Third up there, top right, is grants. That grants aren't just handouts. There are things that come along with the grants. That might mean additional requirements or expectations. Practically what it might mean is there's, in terms of consuming time, there's a window for the application and then review and then knowing whether or not we got the grant. Once there's official confirmation that we got it, now there might be additional work. I've either got to survey more areas or do some study within an area that we wouldn't have otherwise done. So it is something that typically will require more time. And what you see when grants are included or at least offered to you in a budget is, you'll see in the agenda report, and if you don't, make sure and ask and point it out, but you'll see it in there because we look at it, what the assessment is on how much that might affect the timeline of a project. We put that in there, we assess that and we put that in there. So, but it is something to consider anytime you see a grant on a project. And when I say grant, I mean a variety of external funding sources. So it might not be, might not be called a grant, but it's external funding. So bottom left, public arts, it's great. It's what brings the wow to a project. It seems like a small thing. It does end up, in my observation, it does end up having an impact on time. One of the things that you've asked for is in the Cultural Affairs Commission's instructions or their founding documentation. Style, type, and location are different points in the process that we're supposed to bring back to the Mayor and Commission for a vote on that. And let me pause there and say, these little buttons up here kind of, maybe think of them as dials that you can dial up, dial down, and I think you've already started to dial down the units, right? So, but think of them that way, that these are things that you might have some control over and might help us with time. But public art is certainly one, and we try to bring public art decisions along with something that we're already bringing you, but often it doesn't line up. I think you've got one in this next agenda cycle that you'll see is just, public art style. I forget exactly what it is, but it's just that. Well, there's 60 days just in the agenda cycle that it takes to bring you that decision. Next one, intergovernmental agreements. As you know, many of our projects are partners. I'm using the term intergovernmental agreement, but that might also mean the Village Department of Transportation as an external agency or private entities like Athens-Clarke Trust that we sometimes partner with, right? These things take, or when I say intergovernmental agreement, Athens Behavioral Health, with the mental health, we've got Housing Authority, Classics Authority, the Athens Regional Library System, the Downtown Development Authority. These are all agencies that have their own governance, their own processes. And so now there's, an investment of time in engaging with them, developing that partnership, the terms of that partnership, and then bringing it to you in a formalized document. I think North Downtown Athens Phase 1 alone, like 7 different ways that we've brought. Days each minimum just in the agenda cycle, not to mention preparing all the documentation. These are necessary things. They're just consumers of time that are on top of that base process. I put site selection on there in the bottom right, simply because, it doesn't apply to every project, but it does apply enough. And there's a whole nother slide of a 2-year process, 4 different, mayor and commission decisions that is included in that process. It's just a big enough thing. While it doesn't affect every project, the ones that it does, it affects it. Okay, so when I put all that together, this is kind of a 20 years later. This is your contemporary version of that first slide that I showed you with some of those other things added in. And so, I can understand if those that are not involved in this business might look at that and go, "This is Josh being asked for all this. This is ridiculous," But this is the professional process that we follow, starting with the base and adding on these other elements. And this, or some version of this for each project, that right there is a timeline for a single project. And I point that out because, as you know, we keep up with these things in software, and when I do reports from our software, one of the things that you will see is that there are 113 different discrete active sub-projects right now between all 5 programs. And each one has their own timeline, their own budget, their own scope, their own contracts, and their own dedicated staff time, meetings. So, and I feel like this is something that we look at and think maybe there's some room for improvement here, right? Because if I'm working on one just as a practical matter, then I can't be working on another one as well.
What was the number? Just
113.
Oh, okay, that was the next one.
Josh, can I ask one question? I know Kelly wants us to stop and wait, but I'm just going back to this chart.
But
You see here,
It's one,
the one that they showed that made us all dizzy.
yeah,
So if you look at the top of the thing, am I reading this right? So pre-design phase, 426 days, design phase, 590 days. And I really want to say something, but I'm not going to say it, because I'm just going, are you
where are those numbers?
kidding me? I mean, seriously, is this what you're putting up here? I know it's not you, but is this what we've been accepting?
this is the process as it is right now, yes. And a lot of that is, some of that I will say is.
It's absurd. I mean, when you look at what the UGA is building right now, you think they're taking over 3 years to put up the dorm, to put up that new center they're putting up over there, Oglethorpe?
So in a couple minutes, what do we want to dial down?
I just think it's,
What do we want to eliminate? And that's just keep thinking that question. I love the way that you frame that, Josh.
you know what's
What do we
going
want to dial down? What do we want to eliminate? Both on the administrative and the legislative process. Keep going.
All right. What's the next one? Okay, this one is pre-referendum, and I put this one up for really two reasons. One is that, I have kind of observed kind of psychological effect how we use our pre-referendum time, and that, in a lot of our minds, the project becomes real and there's a public submission. Now we're having meetings about it. We're reviewing it. It's on some list somewhere. So the life of the project is actually born way before the referendum, even before, certainly before we do kickoff or user group, before we earn money to pay for it. The clock in our minds tends to start in the middle of this pre-referendum process. And so by the time we get around to even starting what I've showed you already, the project is already years old. To your point, that went in our minds, and that's why I talk about the pre-referendum effort. The other reason why I showed you this, of course, I've been spending some time talking to what I call peer community. So Augusta, Columbus, Macon, Savannah, and Chatham County, and even Valdosta. I've stayed away from Metro Atlanta. And it's been really interesting, really informative, and I anticipate doing a lot more of that. One of the things that I've found, I will go ahead and share with you though, is in how they use their pre-referendum time. How we do it's a little bit different, and there are many ways in which all of us are different, and that's okay. But one of the observations that I've made is that pre-referendum time, there's somewhat of uniformity in how these peer communities use that pre-referendum time and how we do. And it allows them to kind of get farther along in the project before it's even on the referendum list. The way we involve the community when it's on the referendum, it's really not much more than an idea that we do our best to apply a scope to and budget to. A lot of times, if we use the pre-referendum time differently, and again, I'm cautious not to suggest anything to you, just pointing out an observation that years here have an effect on how long the project takes, and that in other communities, if they're able to start a project earlier, get farther along before we even earn the first cent, then that could make a difference, at least in our minds. All right. This is my last slide, and then I'm going to stop talking, and I know I'm beyond my 10 minutes, so I'm sorry about that. My first impressions on the job, I think the first thing I'll say, this isn't a bullet point on there, but Josh doesn't really have opinions in what we should or shouldn't do here. I want to know what y'all want. My job is to understand that. If there's consensus about how we change, that's what I'm here to execute, understand and execute. And I think there is opportunity here. You might have already pointed out to me one area where you'd like for me to make some changes. If there's two things that I would encourage you to think about, it's number one, I'm not sure if I've used this before, but level of control. So level of control is, what do you want me to bring back to you for a decision? Obviously, that base plan had 3 different times that we bring. So at any given project, you're probably going to see more than that I'm bringing a project back to you. It might be change orders. It might be, contract, budget amendments, any of those buttons that I showed you There are all kinds of reasons why we might need to bring you a decision. That's what I call level of control. Is it too much? Is it too little? Do you want all those things? Do you not want some of them? That's what I'd like to know. And then second is the level of public engagement. And public engagement can take many forms. It can be, that formal, what you think of with surveys and in-person town halls, or it could mean, any way that we involve non-staff members in the process, right? So those two things are things I want you to think about. Do you want more? Do you want less? Do you want me to just tailor it more? And that if there is consensus on changes you'd like to see, we're capable of executing whatever process you like. I would say if we are considering making changes and implementing changes, given that we've got 113 sub-projects right now that are in the middle of the process, let's think about applying it to future programs. There might be some trials we want to run on changes on projects that we already have ongoing, but when I think about it, I think about it in terms of future projects. And then the next steps up there, obviously, I'm going to continue to talk to peer communities, learn more, see if there are lessons that we can bring back here. We've got an upcoming operational analysis review, which I think will be very helpful. And then obviously manager's direction will be a strong voice as well in this process. So I'm going to stop talking there. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sure you've got a bunch of praise that you're.
Josh, do this kind of as we go around the room. Let's go back to the graphic of the buttons, because I think that's a good way to center us on some of these levers that we can, again, dial up, dial down, or even prospectively eliminate. So Melissa's hand first. I'll go around. I'll get everybody.
Yeah, so this doesn't surprise me at all. Anybody who's ever built a house on their own or lived through a kitchen renovation understands how complicated it is to move from concept to fruition. When you're dealing with different contractors, all that, you throw all this in, input from the public, grant money, intergovernmental agencies, site selection, when you don't even own the land and might get dragged into court over eminent domain issues. I mean, 4.5 years does not seem ridiculous to me at all. I mean, I know people who build houses and it's taken them close to that just for a house on a piece of property they already own. But yeah, I'm reluctant to any of these buttons here. I think maybe definitely the user group thing, we could tweak that. I feel like there should be more citizen representation. I feel like it should be equal between citizens and staff. I'm reluctant with anything on public engagement, but yeah, I see how pre-referendum, maybe we could engage in that more, a more clear concept pre-referendum. So maybe that would clear up some of those hurdles as we go through the design phase. But yeah, I mean, it's never been a mystery to me as to why some of these projects can take a really long time. Then you throw 10 elected officials into the mix who have to vote on this stuff at multiple points along the way, and stuff gets kicked onto the next agenda or whatever there, or it goes back to citizen committee. I'm not surprised that things take, 4 years for a project to rise from the ground. So,
But you should be disappointed.
I mean, it's hard, but I see it in other communities where it takes the same amount of time. I mean, maybe when you're dealing with, okay, so I look at Atlanta, they have tons of private money. When you have private money flowing into projects, anything can happen. UGA does not have to deal with any kind of citizen input or, they have their own land. They don't even have to go through planning and zoning. They can make stuff happen like that. We are a democratic community and really embrace our citizen input, and we have an elected body of 10 people. So I can see how things are extra complicated for us.
Good, Dexter.
Thank you, Mayor. Probably the only person who's around the table who would actually have a SPLOST committee report to them. And to Commissioner Hammond's point, very disappointing. I was there 3 years. We built 2 brand new schools, a field house, and a track. And basically, I've said this before. First of all, the first thing we need to do, we should always have our site selection in place. That should be number one. We should know where we're gonna build at first. That's number one. It should always be number one. Once we figure that out, then we can move to the next phase. And we wait till we collect our taxes. Well, say we price something out at 30 million. 5 years down the road, it's doubled. And what we did at the school system was, once we priced it out, we floated a bond. We got that bond in place, it's gonna cost us 30 million to build Clarke Middle. We float that bond, and as the taxes come in, you pay. Just like you do a house. You borrow the money, you pay it off. Same thing we do. So our processes got improved. It should not take us, we add in everything, actually 7 years to really go through that process. And our community is upset because we don't have nothing to show. You know, we're 7 years or 10 years down the road, there's nothing to show. So we really, Josh, to your point, and for my colleagues around the table, our process got to improve. I think what we did, one thing we did, I think you, Jay, and we talked about our school board, they had to do the same thing. You do a design and you build. I think all this back and forth, bring it back to, okay, once we pick the design up and we approve that, to get the construction down, let's move forward and get these things built. That's what's holding us up because we go through so many processes to get these things done. We can easily, because our efficiencies are not very good. We can't improve on those efficiencies. If we want to see an outcome and what our community expect. You know, we shouldn't be having things from 2011, even from 2020. You know, we're 5 years in. So we gotta do better. So that's sort of my thing, but we can do it. We did it within the school district and it works. It truly works, but we gotta figure it out and get together and make it work.
Carol?
Yeah, I have several points here, and I'm just gonna respond to Dexter. I think there's a lot to learn from where other groups are doing it. Respectfully, you know, just my gut reaction is that the school, there's a little bit of difference in that the school district is basically building schools. So there is some economy and learning where we have so many different projects. So I would imagine it would be a little bit different here. I would like to see our process be more efficient and effective where we can. So the first thing I would say is I'd also like suggestions from you, Josh, from what you're seeing and what's, you know, in other places. You're looking at this every day. We're looking at tons of things. So I'd like your suggestions on how this process could be streamlined and more efficient. That's one thing. On the bond stuff, I guess the information I'd like as well, this is just information, is that I know that we do get bonds. Yes, we've got bonds for the arena, for the Classic Center and such. And I can't remember what if there was some rule about how much you can bond out, because it's always gone to these big projects like the arena so that you can take care of the costs up ahead. So, I mean, I just don't even know, like, you know, you got $100 million SPLOST program. Can you bond out the whole thing and do that? Would that make sense? I just need that information. In terms of these bubbles here, the public engagement on the site selection, and the user groups. I'm not sure I want to get rid of it always, but I want there to be a decision about whether it's needed and how it's needed. So, I mean, I can think of something where the user group, like the library, forget about the site selection, but the library, it makes sense to have a user group of people who are interested in that. Whether or not every sidewalk project needs to have a user group might be something different. So, I mean, I'm kind of adding on a step in, like, do we need user group? And then the second thing with public engagement is like sometimes, you know, like, what is the purpose of public engagement? Is it really public education? Are we using it? How much? Are there other ways to do it that are more efficient? Sometimes it seems like we're going through the motions. We have the stuff, no one shows up, there's few people, then at the end. So reevaluating what the purpose is rather than just to say we're doing public engagement. User group site selection. I think it was, well, I know that one of our former assistant managers talked about that we kind of have things backwards here with the site selection for the major projects. And if there's an alternate way of doing this. The other thing that was brought up in the past discussions I've had is, no offense to any SPLOST staff that are here, but we have all of our projects done by an outside consultant. Is that something we want to continue to do? What's are the pros and cons of that? Could it be partially done in some areas and not areas? And I don't know, for example, you have a boss in the manager's office who can tell you what to do or not to do, I guess, to some degree. But I don't know how much the manager's office really can direct the people in the SPLOST office. So would that change there? The missing slide, I think, again, like I said the other night, is the tiering, because there is all the information that goes before we select the stuff and they get on the referendum and they're chosen. And then I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about how they're all being built out. So even if it is, it just has to be there somewhere. This is being built in here, like with the number. I mean, that's communication. Anything else? That's all of my things. In-house project, role of manager, current process. So yes, ultimately, I'd like to see us look over this. The fact that you have the 2004, the slide there that shows how long this process has been there. And then even for the public engagement, I know we're one of the few places that has this very, very substantial public engagement in terms of the projects. So reevaluating that, it seems like it's, beyond time to reevaluate that, even if it's pretty efficient.
Mike? Sure. Y'all, I think at some point we just need to start putting down expectations. We can sit here and list all the things that we want to see happen, but we're not project managers. And
That's why I asked for his.
No, I understand that, Carol. I heard you ask for that. But we also made a whole bunch of other suggestions and, at the end of the day, I'd just like to hear us say, hey, here's our projects. Here's how we tier them. Y'all get whatever's in this tier done within a year. And Josh, you figure out how to make that happen.
Yeah.
So knowing that, cut back on why does public engagement need to take 60 days? Maybe it just needs to take 30 days. So, just let's, as a body, tell the manager to make this happen. You go figure it out. I'm not going to sit around a table for an hour telling you what needs to happen to make this process shorter. All I'm saying to you is I want this to take a year for these projects. If it takes more than a year, then somebody has to be held accountable. That's all I gotta say.
I need to hold my hand up like this, okay? No, I need to hold my hand up like this, okay? Go ahead, Stephanie.
Thank you for this presentation. I did some research because I agree with Mike. It's the slide that said 2004, respectfully, I don't think there's an appetite to change. That's what I think. I'm not speaking for anyone else. And so I want to compare the research that I've conducted to what we have here. And so when looking at Athens, it's the smallest county, but it's the 19th largest in population. And so you said you didn't compare your results, some of the research that you did, to some of the larger counties in the Atlanta area, but we fit right in with them. For example, the county, Gwinnett, Cobb, DeKalb, and Chatham. The smaller counties are not where we want to be compared to. And I have some specific data that I wanted to share. And I did search for the positive and areas of improvement. So 294 days for approvals for administrative cycles is excessive. This is from Cornell University. I have Cornell University and two other research methods that I looked at over a period of days. And I'd be happy to share it with you. Multiple approval levels, the manager's office and the mayor and commission, that could be reduced. But what this document suggests instead, that we need to beef up our technology integration. These other counties, there's no mention of a project management software or digital dashboard. These other counties have it. We often don't know the status of any project. We do receive, or we don't receive, but we can go online and get the monthly report, but it doesn't tell us anything about the past and the future. what's left, what's happening, if there was a delay. We hear it when we get agenda items. We hear that type of detail, but it should be a dashboard. It's many Georgia cities are integrating project management systems for transparency and efficiency. We have a limited online engagement tool. And this is the only tool that we have, which is to go to the site and download the PDF. We can't interact with it. We still rely too heavily on the design, bid, build approach. These other progressive cities are relying on, or they're executing design, build, CMR, and P3. I feel like we operate in the 80s, and this is actually CMAR and P3. This is like 2000, so this is even old, but we haven't even done this. And so for the people watching, CMAR is construction manager at risk, which means the construction manager commits to delivering the project within a guaranteed maximum price. If the costs go up, they cover the overrun unless there is a scope change, and we do have scope changes. And the P3 is just more public-private partnerships. The other communities that were compared directly to Athens and how we can improve quickly, Gwinnett, Cobb, Fulton County, the city of Atlanta, and Savannah. Another recommendation was to digitize tracking for residents for improvement of transparency. Streamline land acquisition. And generally, these other counties take 2.5 to 3 years to complete our 10-year SPLOST projects. The 113 active sub-projects mentioned suggest the need for better portfolio management tools. We don't have that. That would be helpful. We don't know about the sub-projects until an agenda item. Sometimes they're not on here, you know, that helps. According to GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, they also recommend dashboards and monitoring and tracking for residents, and especially for commissioners. And last, the Georgia Office of Planning and Budget has the same recommendation. And but the additional recommendation that they have is that in our SPLOST projects going forward, capital and SPLOST, T-SPLOST or whatnot, that we should embed our key performance indicators in our dashboard so that anyone can see where we are at any place, at any moment in time with the project. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Avita.
I was going to suggest, I know, Josh, that you said that you would rather move, you know, whatever we come up with, we'd implement with the new projects, the 113, you know. I really think that we need to start with the 113.
Okay.
I really think we need to clear our board and start fresh. So whatever is needed to complete these, we need to go ahead on and get it done. I think it's going to get lost in the future, and we still look like we're behind. I served on the SPLOST board. Totally different. I heard what Carol said about they're just into schools and everything. But I think the structure is the same, no matter whether you're doing schools or whatever. We get a report every month. They post their what they've done and what they're lacking on their website every month. When I go, I know how much these SPLOST dollars have brought in for that month. And then they go back and compare it to what it came in last year at the same time. We don't have any, now that might be because I'm on the oversight board, you know, but I think that is the kind of information the community needs to see. On the user group, see, I'm totally confused. Well, I'm totally enlightened now because I thought the user group and the public engagement were the same folk. So if I'm confused, everybody else is confused. So a lot of people are confused. where does the user group get the vision? Where does that come from? For example, if the user group, it doesn't come from us. We don't say you need such and such, right? You know what I'm talking about? If a project comes, where does that come from?
So it has to pursue the referendum language at a start, the baseline.
That's right. So where it starts is the project statement before the referendum.
Project statement, who creates the project?
Well, that would be one thing that initially is developed by staff and then brought to you for a decision before the referendum. Project scope, project statements as they're written, that's something that mayor and commission would approve.
Does that come, so the project statement, does that come before the actual T-SPLOST or SPLOST projects? When people present, there's a project statement there?
It is developed out of that. Yeah,
Okay.
that's kind of the first step is here's, kind of executive summary of what this project is. Now, over time, and of course, attorneys will be involved in making sure that this scope captures all the things that we needed to, as well as the flexibility that we needed to, adding in some language saying, we can exercise, external funding sources or whatever. But in the end, those project statements are brought to you in a final project list. For example, T-SPLOST 2026, you'll probably see that in December. Final project list. That'll be something that you all will be able to develop yourselves or with the help of staff.
If we're going to ask community people to be involved, they really should feel like they're being involved. My representatives felt as though staff was leading them and was talking condescending to them. And I've talked to you, so I haven't said anything that I haven't talked to you about. I don't see how even the best community servant can really engage in these conversations without technical assistance. I think that you gotta have both.
That's right.
But I don't know if we could modify the public engagement. I don't know, but I do know pointing people to these committees and not having any, they just want to do the right thing, but don't have the technical problem situation. Then we get into some of the things that I've seen in the past.
Right.
Now, I know Commissioner Lincoln's gonna be totally upset with me, but that 1% public art, I think that should be rated or judged per project.
Yes, it is.
But I got some stuff in my district that we didn't know about, so I need to make sure that I know that if something's gonna be recommended in public art, that it is something that is not across the board. Now, it's been a minute. Yeah,
It's an important step.
okay. So, but yeah, that was my question from constituent. So there you go, Kelly. I won't raise my hand no more.
And Tiffany, then Allison.
So my question is there a legal way to suspend projects and reallocate the monies to different projects that hasn't been created, just for the new commission?
Judge stepped out of the room. I'll start with fake lawyer talk and the real lawyer will be back.
Okay.
In Georgia, there's a really high bar to consider a project infeasible.
It's been voted on.
Once it's been voted on in the SPLOST or T-SPLOST referendum, it has to be very significant. I mean, like in a school context, it would have to be, hey, we dropped 50% population in the school district. We don't need an elementary school anymore, for example. Like that's one example. But generally speaking, if the voters have said, hey, these 34 projects are what we're voting on, those have to be built in some form or fashion.
What if they receive their reward already?
If we're-
The joke, what if they
Yeah.
died?
If they've gone on to the great beyond.
Still have.
That may be an unusually high.
From
Set up, go through some kind of.
From 2005, a lot of people are gone.
Well, used to, you could just basically say the project is infeasible, and you still can, but now you have to take it back to a referendum, and let the voters vote and decide what to do in place of that. And the bar for a project being feasible is not just this current commission. The current commission doesn't want to do it right now. It's much higher. You have to be basically, not able to do it, that's really, so it's just not as simple as saying it's infeasible. Infeasible means not practical, not possible, you follow what I'm saying, versus we just don't want to do that project.
Any follow-up, Tiffany? Just
Even if it's been like 20 years and nothing has come of it?
Right. I would need to know, it doesn't say anything about time period making a project infeasible, in the statute, but it depends on what the reason is. If it's just not possible to do the project, that's infeasible. Does that make sense? We have projects that are 20 years old we haven't done.
Oh, I don't know.
I was curious. Okay.
This is what
Oh, a couple things on the 2011 referendum hanging out there. Obviously, like the youth.
Yeah, they're done, but
Stephanie, follow up on that. Now, Alice.
Question, so what an example would be, so with a project that's been completely underestimated in cost, and it's 7, 8, 9, 10 years later, could that be determined and defined as infeasible
I don't believe so,
because of cost?
Because you can still do it. You just got to come up with the money somewhere else. Once the citizens vote on it, the project has to be done. I'm trying to think what might be infeasible. Project, a location where you're going to do it, and you made that specific in the thing, is then determined to be environmentally unsafe. You can't build there.
Hopefully, we got no nuclear waste hanging out there. Got Allison and Patrick.
One small example for that, I think there was something on the Classic Center campus that was supposed to include childcare. And because of the brownfield stuff, remember that part of the detail was not feasible because that's not where you can do that. That's a baby version.
Yeah.
No pun intended, but that's a smaller version, right? They found out at that site, daycares aren't allowed. But so my stuff is just kind of a reflection on, one, how complicated it is. And you're trying to make these little buttons, and the user groups, in my mind, could have 5 deviations underneath it, because we start off with the whole committee that we have right now, hopefully 2 of each representative, to each elected official for the referendum. Half of them stay for the oversight to make sure it keeps happening. Then the user group, I was asked for one of the SPLOST in my district to give 2 community members' names. They never got contacted because the user group turned out to be all internal. So then when you say user group is stakeholders, is that staff or community? So I think the definition of the different groups we use is hard to keep up. And then when the projects are taking so long, the champions who might have been the elected officials are not at the table anymore. We have to explain it again, and they lose some of their champions. But I do think there's the complexity of it is demonstrated in explaining it. And you're new, Bob's got it more experience coming into it. He can't fix the whole thing, but we're going to hope that he can shed some light on some more efficient ways for it to be done. And here we are in the middle of a process trying to fix it. The complexity is real. And it's, I think what we're all saying is that we're hearing their improvements can be made, and the community part, I feel like if we're using more community members focused in the smaller groups, then the time spent putting the public engagement out is hard to capture what the smaller groups have been done or being done, because I felt like with some of the things in the school district's version of it is the more community members you're using with the details, they were sharing in the community, and the word was getting out in a more one-to-one basis versus a survey type thing. So, yeah.
Patrick? Yes. So, coming into for especially have some questions. this fall meeting. And I agree, we need to improve this process. Hearing should have been a slide because it would help show how money is allocated without floating a bond and how projects gets done. Because like we have 10 projects and we're using SPLOST dollars. We're using the T-SPLOST or SPLOST dollars, and some of these projects will cost tens of millions or millions of dollars. So instead of floating a bond, hurting our rating, charging higher interest rate, what we do is wait for the money to come in. If you can provide that slide, that would be helpful. Commissioner Fisher already, I had a question to ask him how he managed with the school board and public engagement. Just, do you get a lot of, my sentiment is that we don't get a lot of feedback. We get it from the same people, maybe 20, 30 people. So I'm not saying that it's not, I don't want to say it's a waste of time for that public engagement, but there are ways that we can enhance it where we get a more diverse group of people, a more variety of folks, or is it even, necessary? Maybe fold in user group into public engagement. And my last one that I had was, can I get peer review other cities from, but, for me, yes, we need to streamline it. You're the best expert to get that done, and hopefully we can provide you feedback so we can get it done.
Carol?
I am interested, Bob is new here. I would be interested in hearing if he has any observations coming from outside, brand new, fresh.
Yeah, and I wanted to wait till you all had your questions with those. So yeah, when Josh shared this with me last week, it was just that one spot,
Yeah.
not the 2004 one, but the current contemporary one. There's too much process. The process virtually ensures the timeline that we have. Now, there's going to be some efficiencies gained that Gavin's working on inside, but it really, you're not going to, and I'm not saying this is good or bad, it's the process that was built. You're not going to substantially change the time frame if there is going to continue to be an expectation for every project to have every one of those touch points as an example. If there's an expectation, somebody mentioned kind of a dorm project, the Board of Regents does not see the design 4 times before it moves forward. If they did, it would take just as long to build that dorm. They don't ask the residents that are going to move into the dorms to play a role in what the design of the dorms look like. They probably don't even ask the neighboring properties what it's like, good or bad, but that's affecting that piece of it. So I think as we redesign the process, understand that it's probably going to come back with some changes in touch points. And some of those touch points will be you. Some of them may be the community. Maybe we can do things that make the touch points we do have more effective. You've talked about that. So you have fewer of them, but the ones you have are more effective. Public art's a really good example of that. I mean, I come out of an environment where public art was included in most of our projects. That never went to the elected body, ever. You empowered the Arts Commission in our case to make those decisions. That's what they're there for. The only thing the designer had to do was know, is it going to be on a pedestal because it's sculpture on the property, or is it going to be a wall that needs to be dedicated to a mural, and let the arts folks actually do that so that it works its way through the process concurrent with the rest of the process, and you don't have those touch points, just using that as an example. So I think, we'll have to come back with probably a fairly radically different looking process, probably with more effective but fewer touch points along the way. And then also looking at things like how do we fund it, making certain that communication is better so that people understand this project was never planned to be started until year 3 or year 4. That's the tiering piece of it. So there aren't those expectations with it. The other thing that I also noted, and it wasn't really anything that we talked about here, but talked with Josh, is I also think it's really important to make certain that the majority of the projects that are being identified that go into the SPLOST are coming out of some policy, some objective you're trying to accomplish. So that's where your master plans and your corridor plans and your comprehensive plan stuff come into play, so that you're not just creating projects that are favorable in the moment, that you're actually moving strategically. And we didn't talk much about those, but you could also put some extra effort up front in the development of those projects so that when you get into the project delivery, you don't have to have as many touch points. But those are things when I first looked at it, I thought, well, this is, and again, I know there are probably things inside also that could be done a lot more efficiently, and that's what we're working on, come out of the operational assessment. But there's no way you can deliver, in my opinion, there's no way you can deliver the projects much faster than what we're delivering them if that process stays exactly as it is. It's too much. And never mind that, and you all alluded to this, you also are introducing new risk along the way every time you, over the course of 4.5, 5, 7 years, you've changed commissioners. Those commissioners now are touching it to a point where they can actually say, we don't like this design, go back and change the design. That's going to add time. And you want, you want the ability for it to adapt to circumstances, but you also got to have a point at which you know with certainty what you're building so that you can actually move forward. I totally agree with the component of it. I mean, it's kind of surprised me, a couple of projects that are going on that are already funded, committed, we can't get out of them, we're moving forward, and we don't even have we don't have the site, we don't have the right of way, we don't have the easement, we don't have the location. That puts us both in a time crunch and it puts us in a real undesirable negotiating position for those sites because you have to buy them, you have to get them. So those are kind of those quick, it's easy for me to say that right now because I'm 3 weeks in, so it's easy. These things really need to change. I'll know more as we go through, but I think I have no doubt that we can come back to you with a process that actually will deliver faster with meaningful touch points. So we can still get the kind of engagement you all want and that the community expects.
When should we expect to see that?
As fast as you want it to be. I mean, I really don't think it's going to take long at all because it's really deconstructing the process you have now. And coming back.
916 days.
No, it's not. Yeah. We're not going to fit on that. We won't fit on that chart. We'll actually
The
create.
sooner the better, because I do think, I did bring up the UGA stuff, but they do have several touch points that they have to operate on.
Yeah.
That they've come to us for, or some authorities that we have for some funding parts. So there's different iterations there that it may be different challenges, but they also have the same, but they also get it done quickly.
And you have to have touch points. I mean, there are things by law you have to do, and there are things by intent you want to do. So we just need to move through those that are fitting in there. And yes, I think we can do that relatively quickly to come back with a different process.
Stephanie?
I agree with the complication of the process, but I do think it doesn't have to be complicated. I think it has grown to be complicated and forced to deal with it. City in this report that I looked at, studied the state of Georgia and SPLOST and capital project improvement programs, they all said to change the process and increase the speed, reduce the touch points, but make the information available, the digitized project tracking system, a public-facing dashboard. We wouldn't have to ask all the questions. We wouldn't have to touch it, every single agenda item. We can go on and look, and our residents can too. When it comes to public engagement, I do know that departments have a difficult time getting people out for public engagement. And I question, the effort. I don't know why that is. My colleagues, when they have a different public engagement or town halls, I mean, I've been to Dexter's and he's had over 100. I mean, Obita's had 50. I mean, like when I try to go to as many as I can, if I'm available, and we have people that will show up for information and education. And the last thing I'll say is in my district, I've already heard there's a hefty, like obese appetite for not approving SPLOST 2026, just because of the inefficiencies we're talking about. They're already trying to get me.
Patrick, Ovita, and Melissa. Yeah.
I just want to know what P3 was.
3 is private partnership.
And I got CMAR, and this is just for the group transparency. We do away with user groups and do something with user group. Just giving thought that, one of the biggest things that we talk about is transparency and having those people in our community to be the voice of some of these projects.
Oh, announcement, okay. I did want to reiterate again about looking at those 113. I think that'd be an amazing note because Commissioner Johnson hit it right on the head about the 2026 T-SPLOST coming up. And if we are not able to show something from 2023, or if we linger even further behind, it's going to be hard to pass a 2026 T-SPLOST project. And this is so refreshing for me, and it might sound a bit self-serving, but this conversation and this openness about we need to change the process, hearing that from staff, not from, other commissioners or even constituents, but hearing from staff, it takes some of the pressure off of us that are elected. Because I've said this in private meetings, well, not private meetings, but like staff meetings. The folk do not look at who is, they just see us around the rail. But to have this clearly articulated that this is a change, it worked probably somewhere in the past, but now it's time to change. It really helps all of us. And then it doesn't make us look like we're like, what the hell is going on? So I thank you for being that transparent.
We're eager. And we want you to be, I guess, if I can lead with this comment, we want you to be proud of these projects. We want you to look forward to talking to your constituents about what's going on, what's coming up, what we've already done. If we're not there, then I need to be working to get you.
Thank you.
Got Melissa and Carol, and I've got a few comments.
A couple of things. I agree that maybe this body doesn't need to weigh in on the public art aspect. I don't necessarily think we need to make art a political process. We should trust the body of experts that we appoint. But I do think maybe the commissioner for the district which the project is in should be included in that selection committee for those projects. So we're aware of what's going on in our district. The same thing goes for the user groups. I believe if a project is in a particular district, that commissioner should be on that user group, and that user group should include more citizen representation. So you don't get to this part of the process where, I'm able to speak up and say, I'm hearing all this other stuff from my constituents. You only have 2 users on committee who might not be completely in touch with the community. So I think there are places for efficiencies in those kind of citizen committee aspects. I also kind of think that, maybe this group doesn't need to weigh in on the schematic design if you have a more robust user group and oversight committee. Those touch points where we end up having to pass a vote and it delays it another month or whatever. I think by being more rigorous on the front end with the user group and the planning process and assuring that there's more robust citizen input on that front end, you're less likely to have to drag it out through the process.
Carol?
Yeah, I just did an observation and a question for Josh, if he has any thoughts on this with the T-SPLOST programs, which are newer, 2018, 2023, and obviously transportation focused. If there are any specific challenges in the T-SPLOST program, because if you look at 2018, and I just did the quick math, it's that program, we voted on a new program and for the 223, but yet we only have 60% of that first program done. And at this point, we're working on the third program and we have 17% of that program done. So I understand the process, but is there anything specific to the transportation related projects where there's some efficiency that could be gained? Why are they taking longer?
Yes.
In the transportation, particularly to complete them? And any insights or observations?
The first thing that comes to mind is we are talking about transportation. Many of those projects are along corridors that are state corridors.
Yeah.
That subjects us to whatever that process is. Right, so that's the first thing that comes to mind is that many of those projects were along corridor with.
So I had more intergovernmental agreements, right? Anything else?
Nothing immediately comes to mind, but yes, certainly there are considerations with transportation projects, property acquisition. There might be 100 properties that we have to go effectively negotiate with, without the authority, and we understand. You've been clear about insisting on voluntary property acquisition. That does tend to, the effect of that is to drag out these conversations with property owners. Because what if one out of those 100, so.
And of course, I'm
like property acquisition is one.
And utilities too.
Utility relocation, certainly, but that, utility relocation, that occurs for really all the projects. It wouldn't be distinct from any other place.
But actually, when I'm looking at the, where it says the total day process, 1,605 calendar days, 4.4 years, you got a 5-year program. It's only the projects from tier 1 that one would expect to be done following this, with the numbers you just gave us. So that's,
If you're looking at it as a pay it forward program, I think y'all sometimes call it pay as you go sort of a program.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right.
Right, but using the numbers that you gave us here, they should be low.
Yes.
Mayor, if I might, I'm going to give you 2 more dials to be thinking about as staff and operational analysis. Put our heads together on this. One is the number of projects. So in SPLOST 2020 and T-SPLOST 23, you had north of 30 projects, not including Winterville and Bogart. And so if y'all would like to sustain those higher numbers of projects, one tool can be to put more project management staff, in-house or otherwise, on the projects. Second thing is, when you talk about the timing of delivery, the length of the referendum. We did SPLOST 2011 at a target of 10 years. We did SPLOST 2020 at a target of 12 years. If you would have asked me in 2019 what my house was going to cost to build in 2027, I would have been spectacularly wrong. And yet, because the tiering conversation comes well after the solicitation, I can't point to ILCA and say, ILCA, your project's not going to be tiered for 8 more years. And so we actually need a 35% contingency. And so it creates this tension between those champions of the project and the individuals that have to hold them financially accountable. So those are things especially important to think about as you move into your next T-SPLOST referendum. There's 2 other dials you can tweak as you go.
Andrew, I just don't buy into the fact that we need more people in the planning process, making as one person. So I don't buy that. Maybe we start off the programs with too many projects and we ought to do less projects that make a more meaningful impact.
Yeah.
But to suggest that we have not only a private firm and now somebody full-time doing this, I think that's not the solution.
Want to contribute a few thoughts, and I really appreciate the discussion. And just so you know, I think you probably are aware, this is a conversation that's being had in local, state, national government all over the country right now. This notion of how do we more rapidly get from concept to execution. So it's an important conversation for us to have. I think we can make a lot of headway in very short order. It sounds like Bob is eager to do the deconstruction that he mentioned a couple of minutes ago. I'll share, I was sitting with another mayor just a couple of weeks ago. He's mayor of a peer community that features a flagship university and a state capitol. And when I told that mayor kind of what our current process was like, she was blown away. And she said, we do a bunch pre-referendum, make sure everybody understands what the projects are. And then the elected body sees it at bid and award. Those are the 2 touch points. Pre-referendum, bid and award. Now, we may not deconstruct quite to there, but what I do like a lot and kind of what Mike offered is this idea of saying on the calendar, what's our outside parameter? What do we consider appropriate? And if that's a year and a half delivery rather than a 3 or a 4 year delivery, I think that gets us not only projects on the ground, but that gets us confidence with the electorate we all work for. You know, I'm joking sometimes about getting pushed onto some of these projects in the wheelchair that, you know, it feel like it's coming pretty quick. You know, a couple of specific observations. We are going to have to, as a policy-making body, you know, understand that if we want faster delivery, that's going to mean fewer touch points on agenda items. So at least moving from 3 agenda items per project to 2, maybe to 1 in some cases, particularly with those recurrent sort of activities like transportation projects that are pretty clear where
size.
we know how to, you know, we know how to build a sidewalk. That's a doable activity. I also feel like public art should be something that we can take completely out of the legislative process. You know, once we've decided what projects are eligible for public art on the front end, which is a vote that this body takes every time we have a new referendum. I think that, you know, kind of in concert with Evita's thoughts, you know, we should look for some immediate reduction in kind of scale of activity. And so maybe there's a 2-tier process. Maybe that first tier is, you know, what we do to attenuate those existing 113 projects. And then maybe second tier is what we do with the 2026 T-SPLOST referendum and beyond. And when it comes to that 2026 T-SPLOST referendum, I think that's a good time for us to move what I would call our standard vanilla projects in-house. You know, we know how to build a sidewalk. We know how to improve an intersection. We know how to build a trail. Those are things we've done recurrently for a long time. Every SPLOST or T-SPLOST referendum for the last 40 years has passed in this community. So we have a lot of confidence in the notion that these are projects that this pretty big, substantial local government can take on its own. I think we just need to embed that talent in departments and have leisure services and transportation and public works, you know, work with Josh or his peers and get that done. I don't think there's any reason why we have to have kind of a more extended process where we spend more time and more money, because those things are concurrent. You know, when we spend more time, that's more consultant dollars, that's more time going back to the designer. I would rather us take those dollars and put them into concrete and steel. So last thing I'll note, I think it's a good idea to bond as much of it as we can. You know, Andrew just mentioned that if you've got a 7-year lag between concept and execution, you're invariably going to be spending a lot more money. And that, of course, has never been true in the last 150 years than it's been here since COVID. So some thoughts I want to leave you with. What I would like is to charge Bob and his team with coming back to us no later than a November vote with a new process.
One last comment is just that I haven't heard anybody chime in, disagree or agree with a transparent, digitized process. I'm totally fine with fewer touch points, but only if we can see the data whenever we want to see the data, and our constituents can too. I don't trust the process without having some type of transparency measure, but I definitely support fewer touch points, but we have to have something else.
Of course, Joseph D'Angelo's shop has worked on a lot of those kinds of things. You know, I'd love to see that concurrent with.
Yeah, I think it's recognizing that there's, and some of you already said this, there are 2 components to that community engagement. One is engagement shaping this project, and the other one is just being informed, and this includes you all, just being informed of how are things progressing and where are they. And I think that's what you're talking about, is making certain there's a way that you and the community can consistently, nearly live, be able to tell where things are in the process. And truthfully, it's a good tool for us to have, because it allows us to have less time answering those questions. And it allows us to be able to gain more trust in the community in terms of the work that's being done, because the work is being done. It's just not actually being put out there to share with everyone. So definitely that's a piece of this as well. It's not necessarily a piece of the project delivery as much as it is a piece of sort of the SPLOST information with it. So.
I'll also validate your request, and that is something we talk about often, mostly in terms of, I think Mayor pointed out, you know, you feel like maps are useful, especially when you're trying to deliver a lot of information, a high volume of information that you want it at their fingertips. You know, how do you do that on 113 projects that happen? You know, it's a challenge for us for sure, but I want you to know it is a conversation that we have often. Is how do we deliver that information in a way that's useful to folks, but not buried. It's there, but it's hard to find.
Thank you.
All right, y'all, let's take a 5-minute break, use the restroom, get some water. And we'll be back to talk with Mel about affordable housing. All right, welcome back, everyone. We are here for the second half of the grand affair that is our monthly work session. Got two items. Next on tap is Melinda Lord, our Director of Housing and Community Development, who's going to give us an update on all things affordable housing. So you want the Athens-Clarke County Wikipedia of affordable housing, it's coming your way.
Thank you very much. And I apologize to two commissioners who have seen most of this last week. So it will be somewhat repetitive.
Are you gonna give a test?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No test, I promise.
For the acronyms, can you spell them out for the first time?
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. So the affordable our agenda, we're going to go through real quick, affordable housing investment strategy, quick history and purpose. Then we're going to go through key initiatives and tools that were suggested in the strategic plan. We'll go through what ACC Gov actions have been implemented or in development. Then we'll take a quick look at the to-do list and then quick review of the GIT committee charge by mayor, the recent charge. So quick history, way back in 2022, the mayor and commission approved $11 million for affordable housing activities with American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funds. And a small, very small percentage of that was used to create and develop a strategic plan. And then a little bit later, MNC approved $1.73 million to support the North Athens or downtown Athens Phase 1 project. And it also has SPLOST money involved in it. And then also Mayor Commission approved a Phase 1 accelerated release of funds, ARPA funds. It was agreed that development projects would take longer and we did not want to wait until the strategic plan was actually finished to get that money out and about. So we released money and about 5.26 million was awarded in ARPA funds to support many different activities, including homeowner occupied rehab, home buyer unit development, down payment assistance, supportive housing, rehab activities. And those are ongoing. And then in July of 2022, we selected a consultant who began developing the strategic plan. Mayor Commission selected GIC to serve as the advisory committee, and that is the Georgia Initiative for Community Housing. It is a group that is made up of many different partners, staff, ACC Gov staff, and external private developers, bankers. I mean, it's a good mix. And then in October 2023, after very extensive community outreach and engagement, Mayor and Commission reviewed and per a commission defined option, accepted the affordable housing investment strategy for immediate implementation. And then the purpose of it is to provide a guide for the next decade, essentially, what the county itself can do. It provides guidance on how we can, as a county, support the development and to meet the needs and gaps of affordable housing in Athens-Clarke County. It provides recommendations, and it's not trying to recreate new wheels. These are things that are legal to do in the state of Georgia, and here's what we're suggesting, and it gives costs as far as approximate. This is what you would need to seed a project to get it up and running. So we hear the number 8,800. How much affordable housing do we need? Well, we need more than 8,800, but the number comes from the number of rental households that were identified making less than $35,000 who can't afford their rent on a regular basis. So that, I'm sorry?
Here?
This was 2023. So it just simply means that the gap in affordable rental housing at that time when this was completed was 8,800. We can assume it may be a little higher, or it might be a little bit lower because we have had a couple of developments that have come on. But this number does signify at least a tangible number that we can look at as far as what needs to be developed to meet the need. And now we're going to get into the strategy initiatives so that you can remember where we are. So the first one is to establish a local housing fund. And this is so that we can maintain flexibility. We can get money out there into the community and help start filling those gaps that exist, that we know exist. And it gives us an idea of where that funding can come from. The first one, of course, is allocating existing dollars from the general budget. And then it suggests other ways that you could possibly feed more money into that affordable housing fund. Then we have build and preserve quality affordable rental homes. It talks about supporting LIHTC projects, leveraging those low-income housing tax credit projects that apply to DCA for approval. The Acquisition Strike Fund, it focuses mostly on multifamily rental properties that exist, that could be, that are NOAAs, as they call them, naturally occurring affordable housing units. So these are likely older multifamily units that have been rental properties for a long time. You go in, you buy it, you rehab it, and it's managed as affordable housing. So rather than it being a naturally existing, it's a maintained purposeful affordable housing unit in for however long you want to identify. And then the voluntary inclusionary zoning, it talked about calibrating our existing voluntary inclusionary zoning policy so that we can increase the number of units that we produce. Further along, we get into expanding access to home ownership and supporting existing homeowners. So it talks about having a dedicated down payment assistance program, allowing for high levels of down payment assistance as a subsidy so that lower income households can actually have a lower mortgage and actually be able to afford to buy a home, which, you know, that's significant. If you think about a 20% down payment on an average home, most people can't do that. So, and also expanding homeowner occupied rehab. So we have those, but it suggested we increase the grants for homeowners up to $10,000, especially since, you know, costs have increased significantly since COVID. And then it suggested some additional tools for implementation. And the first one it talks about is public land disposition, and simply identifying Athens-Clarke County owned properties that would be suitable for affordable housing development, selling some of those properties that may not be suitable for affordable housing at market rate, and then putting that into the Affordable Housing Fund. And then restoring the ACC Land Bank Authority, because they can advance that public land disposition. And they can also acquire vacant, abandoned, and non-revenue generating properties to sell to private and public developers for specifically building affordable housing. And the purpose of the Land Bank Authority is Athens-Clarke County cannot sell its own property for anything less than market rate. A Land Bank Authority can't sell it for less. So that it's an apple or a carrot.
Before you leave this slide, I forget, I just want to say this is my personal favorite right here. The getting rid of some of our properties.
Okay.
Putting them to higher, better use.
Yes.
And getting back on the tax digest, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
I like it.
Melinda, what was that number again?
We have identified 7 specifically that were really looked at and said, yes, these would be really good sites for affordable housing. How many more
There's around 40 total of kind of
properties that we own?
what you would say is surplusable. They don't have a designated purpose. But the majority of those, the 33 or so, tend to either be like side lots or fragments of a lot. They're not really usable in that manner.
I just wanted to make sure, so, you know, when I hit the campaign trail, I can know what I'm talking about.
Well, and again, that goes back to, there are some of those sites that may not be suitable for affordable housing, but could be looked at to sell at market value so that that money can then be invested into affordable housing.
Right, and the property committee stands ready to be reenacted, Mr. Mayor, when it's time, once we get that study and all that.
It's an opportunity on the horizon.
Yep, absolutely. Then we have single family rehab and infill. And this is to support large-scale rehab or new construction, and that this is getting down to the single-family housing, single-family units, homebuyer units, and we want to support private and nonprofit developers. And this kind of, all of this all ties together. So this goes back to giving them regulatory relief, maybe some technical assistance, funding subsidies. It talked about, again, the housing fund, the affordable housing fund, creating partnerships between for-profit and nonprofits, and then again, the down payment assistance component. And then a final one is redevelopment of public housing. An example that has occurred in the past was Columbia Brookside. It was formerly Paul Doe Public Housing Unit, and it was substantially redeveloped into 3 different phases. The first is a senior housing complex, and then the other 2 are mixed income. So it has public housing, LIHTC, housing voucher, and then market rate within those 2, and it has some home units involved in it. So the thing about this is kind of contingent upon the housing authority. And right now they are very invested in LIHTC projects and NODA phase 2 now that phase 1 is finished. So right now this isn't on their radar, but it is something that if it's on their radar very soon or in the future, we need to consider really supporting and focusing on getting funding to that so that we can redevelop existing public housing. And now we're going to get into what ACC Gov initiatives have taken place. So exciting, as of July 29th, 2025, a contractor has been secured. The contract is executed. We have our first meeting on Thursday, this Thursday, to prepare for phase 1 execution, which is key stakeholder education and outreach. And then this will be phase 1 is months 1 through 3, and it's starting this month. So don't be surprised when you get an invitation from LEH consultants to meet, because you are key stakeholders and a part of that education of what an affordable housing fund looks like, what it takes to get it up and running, and what you want it to look like. But we already have about $6.441 million in that. We have gap financing for LIHTC has the $2.4 million. Single family affordable housing has $2 million, and the acquisition strike fund has $1 million. You allocated another $1 million from the FY26 operating budget. And the reason it's important to note that we have to have a local affordable housing fund is Athens-Clarke County cannot manage this kind of money and allocate it to agencies. It's gratuity violation. So it requires that it be an outside entity, a Community Development Finance Institute, CDFI, or that's basically the best one, or it could be a housing authority, but it has to be an entity other than Athens-Clarke County that operates and manages this money. Otherwise, it's a violation.
And that's LEH that's doing that.
Yes, sir.
What's the relationship between what this consultant will be doing and the CAPE committee?
They're not the same thing.
Well, I know they're not the same thing.
Well, it would be a key stakeholder that would be a part of the engagement process.
Okay.
So they will be involved. And LEH actually assisted Make Bib in getting their affordable housing fund up and running. They were trying to implement it as far back as 2019. And they finally, about 2022, got in touch with LEH. And by 2024, they finally had theirs up and running. So we were fortunate enough after meeting with Make Bib to get this consultant, get to talk to them, meet with them, and get a much quicker timeline than 2 years for implementation. So we're excited to get that ball rolling. The second is support LIHTC projects. So you see we have 5 up on the board. The first one was North Downtown Athens, NODA Phase 1. We were able to provide $9.2 million in SPLOST and ARPA funds to support Phase 1 development and new construction. We did a payment in lieu of taxes agreement. And we also provided low interest loan through the Athens Downtown Development Authority. So a lot of investment to support this LIHTC project. We also have Athens Housing Authority in conjunction with a private developer for Athens Flats. That also had a payment in lieu of agreement and a waiver of 30% water and sewer connection fees. Lexington Flats is applying in October, is that what she said? For 4% LIHTC, but you've already agreed and already approved the pilot payment and a waiver of 30% of connection fees.
Can you tell us the locations of
Yeah.
the flats and the heights?
Athens,
Flats is out near the.
well, Lexington Flats is going to be on Atlanta Highway. Oh, on Lexington and Athens Flats. No, I'm sorry, I'm thinking Classic City Heights.
Athens Flats is Athens-Tech, Lexington Flats is near the airport.
Or
Classic City Heights is
Atlanta
2
Highway.
parcels away from the big target.
Okay.
That's the trend.
I'm sorry, that's the one.
There were too many flats.
That's the trend, that's the trend.
Now we're in the heights.
The Athens Flats is near the space program, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I thought there was a whole lot more SPLOST money that went to the NODA phase 1.
Yeah,
Why does it say 9.2? I thought there was like 36 million.
that was.
There was, phase one that's for the actual construction
Of the building versus
and that
infrastructure.
There was an acquisition cost of 18 or 19 million, some planning cost, and then infrastructure and site prep and demolition were kind of calculated outside of phase one.
And so one important thing to note about these are all private-public partnerships. Athens Housing Authority is partnered in each one of these with a private developer to get the developments up and running. Athens Flats is completed and it's filling up. Lexington Flats, again, they're applying for the 4% LIHTC application. So that's been approved but pending. The Classic City Heights was awarded the GIC point for their LIHTC 9% application. We should know by next month, September, whether they have been awarded that funding. We do anticipate they'll get it. They were only like a half a point shy last time, and they've got a lot more going on this time. So we're really positive about this one. We also have a pending payment in lieu of agreement, a pending waiver for water and sewer connection. And one other thing that I'm going to talk about in the next slide, which is very exciting, I think you'll be happy to hear. And then, of course, NODA phase 2, we're going to be pending approval for a pilot agreement, a waiver of connection fees, and another potential loan there.
Vivi, you had a question on that?
Yeah, I just had a question. Well, first a statement, Athens Flats, the one that is behind Kroger, they have a waiting list already. So that's a good thing. And everybody I've talked to really, really excited now. But my question comes back to NODA downtown. And I guess this is related to the Foundry development with the water and sewer and all of that that's needed to go to that next phase. Is that contingent upon what you're presenting?
No, so phase 2 has received a sewer letter contingent on them upgrading some manholes along the river, which they've agreed to do. So phase 2 can be built as it's proposed today. Phases 3, 4, or 5 will require additional sewer capacity.
Okay.
And we have one project that you mentioned that has a MOU with Core for work in the graduate. They're proposing to do sewer work down by MLK College to create capacity. And then we have another staff-driven project that's happening kind of around between North Avenue and East Broad along the river. Either one of those will create immediate capacity, and both of them create a bigger bank of
North
capacity.
Avenue and who?
So it's on the river, kind of in the segment spanning from North Avenue and East Broad. So it's not directly aligned with an
Which
intersection.
side of the river is it?
It's going from the west side of the river to the east side of the river.
So it's spanning.
That's right.
And I guess while you're answering my questions, I was wondering about what you and I talked about, Andrew, just putting it on public record, be transparent, about a possibility of moving some homes and I would like to bring it before get-go, but Andrew, I wanted to make sure that you and Andrew, I wanted you to be aware that we were looking at these possible homes. I didn't know if you were.
Yes, I'm aware of the
Okay.
mill houses.
Okay, yeah, the mill houses off of Macon Highway. They're going to be demolished if, we can't come up with some. I'm just making it public.
What's the average rent out at the flats? The rent, do we know?
They are managing, LIHTC for, I believe it's 60% or below AMI. I'm not aware of what the actual AMI is at this point. But, it is contingent upon, with LIHTC, it's contingent upon their, income. So they could be in any different
I'm
bracket.
curious,
Yeah, but it's all affordable.
when you finish, I'm gonna ask,
Mhm.
I ask a question once you finish.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Question.
Between FY 19 and FY 2024, the number of new construction, single-family homes, the number of rehab properties, because you mentioned that earlier, and the number of support to nonprofits and what they were. Is that,
It's coming up.
thank you.
Okay, so this is the exciting news. So there's one way that we can use Affordable Housing Fund money. And that is we're providing a loan to the Athens Housing Authority. And so coming up in front of you very soon is a request for a $1 million Affordable Housing Fund loan to support the 9% LIHTC application for Classic City Heights. This is one of the ways that showing this kind of support allows them to get extra points on their DCA LIHTC application. And along with the GIC point, this is why we're really comfortable and confident that if this is approved, that's going to be what it takes to get them over that ledge that little half point that they missed last time. But this is a senior housing 55 plus for households at 70% or below AMI, all affordable, 68 housing units, which equals 111 beds. And this would be our first allocation of AHF funding, and talked about the no to phase 2. They may ask for another 3.5 million from Affordable Housing Fund. So rather than that money sitting there stagnant, there is the potential to have at least 4 million out in doing what it's meant to be doing, which is investing in these LIHTC properties and getting affordable housing rental units developed quickly.
Did you say loan,
Yes, ma'am.
meaning it's going to be repaid back to the fund?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a payment? I mean, I guess we'll see that in the,
You'll see it in the agenda. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so building and preserving quality affordable rental homes. You have Land Trust that is using home and ARPA to develop 4 single units and 3 family units. So this is specific to Reese Street properties. They have the Mac Bernie house that was changed from a single unit to 4 single apartments that are affordable. Then there's 2 houses to the right and a house to the left. One of the houses to the right is already finished and it's already occupied by a family that's affordable rental. We're working on getting that one right beside it finished, and then the other one is under contract or getting under contract so that they can finish it. And then that would be all of those online for affordable rentals. So that's exciting. And then East Athens Development Corporation is using ARPA money to develop 2 family rental units. And we expect, based on what Mr. Smith said, that they should be doing a ribbon cutting anticipated either later this month or by very early September. So we're excited to see those 2 come online as well.
Did a walkthrough Friday, they're very nice.
They're beautiful, absolutely.
You're gonna fight me.
I wrestled him to the ground and took the key.
All right, so the Land Bank Authority, you approved reimplementation of the ACC Land Bank Authority on June 3rd. So the next step is for you to select board members and ad hoc members. So it was agreed that board members. So once they're selected, then they have to get together, develop a work plan and submit that to this body within 2 months. And that includes their budget proposal. And I assume it would also include their executive director criteria. You approve it, and once you approve, then Attorney's Office and HCD will get together to work on an intergovernmental agreement between ACC Gov and the Land Bank Authority. At that time, the Land Bank Authority will post and fill their executive director position. And then once that's done, they will get up and running and they can begin in that disposition of ACC Gov on properties. And they also, just to note, already own 4 properties that have been sitting in limbo for years because they were a defunct entity. So we're looking at 7 properties that we own that are looking good for development of affordable housing, and they already own 4 properties. So it's a good way to start.
Stephanie had a question about that.
As question and a statement, this presentation alludes that the attorney was in agreement with this, and on the record, in 2 separate meetings, he said that he advised that it was not a good area for the Land Bank Authority. I just think it's not worded correctly in that regard. I also did not think the Land Bank Authority was appropriate. And watching the government operations meeting for October, when the visitor was here from Augusta, he made a statement about developing a relationship with the tax assessor before a property, before someone loses their property due to unpaid taxes, and doing a transfer off the books. And I just thought that was wild, because sometimes people have the money, find the money at the last minute. But to get into that arena, knowing that that's what that person recommended, not suggesting that that's what anyone that's on the GOC said that's what they're going to do. I'm just saying there are so many reasons why the Land Bank Authority did make sense to me, because it's really for parcels. You know, it's for developers. It's for developers, not onesie and twosie houses. I mean, I've done so much reading, and I understand a property here and I understand a property there, and you have to get rid of it somehow. But this particular authority isn't ideal for onesies and twosies. If we had an entire, say for example, Homewood Hills was abandoned, that's when the Land Bank Authority would be appropriate, because it's for a developer. Developers are not interested in onesie and twosies, but I'm sure, that's the comment, that's all I had. I'm sure it would work somehow. I just don't want us to get in trouble with having a property transferred to us off the books without having the homeowner find the tax money to pay their bill, you know, and not on the courthouse steps.
Just as a process question, so if the Land Bank Authority did not exist, you of course have properties that were currently end up being auctioned on the courthouse steps. This is a way to ensure that they're put to affordable housing rather than the kind of a market activity, which somebody who might bid on that property and buy it on the courthouse steps would do.
But that person that would buy it on the steps would actually be a property owner and pay property taxes.
They would, and
or the person who owns it.
Similarly, somebody who was a client of the Athens Land Trust, who lived in a home as a homeowner, would be paying property taxes too.
Can I have a little context? That presentation that we had from the Augusta Land Bank Authority, the context was that the properties they were speaking of were abandoned and dilapidated property. We're not talking about occupied properties, family properties where folks want to hold on. These are abandoned. They've targeted and apparently they have an issue with, you know, neighborhoods that have lots of these properties. Ours are kind of scattered.
Yeah, but we don't.
Deeper than many communities, because we have such a robust rental market driven by student housing in our in-town neighborhoods.
I remember the comment, and she's right. If they have a problem in Augusta, we don't have that same problem.
We have a stronger real estate market for sure. But it's in place now, so we'll be seeing some board members.
I just don't want a property owner to find the money at the 11th hour and they expect to go to the courthouse, but somehow internally that property has been transferred without them knowing it, and they can't sell, they can't save their house.
Somebody to have every opportunity as they would currently.
That's not how it was worded. But I trust that we're not gonna do that.
Well, I do think if we're gonna, since Commissioner Johnson has brought that up, I'm sure that, the land bank will have some type of policy or
Procedure, certainly.
procedures, and then that we would make sure that it's written in there, some type of, back door to get out of something, so we don't have to do it like Augusta. I didn't hear the presentation, I'm just chiming in.
Well, and what during our extensive research that we did, meeting with Galva, which is the Georgia Land Bank Authority, and many different Macon Bibb, Savannah. One of the things that they do with those properties that are sitting on the tax assessor's books that are not being paid on is a lot of the times they actually go in, purchase the property, and then sell it back to that homeowner. They give them the opportunity to rebuy that property back instead of it sitting there and potentially being swept up by a private developer. So there are ways to protect those houses through a land bank authority. It can be done, and it's done all the time.
A lot of those are heir properties where you have 13 cousins who own a
Yes.
property and you haven't spoken to 11 of them in decades. And so the two who are kind of functional, can become that homeowner.
Correct. Okay, so expanding access to homeownership with down payment assistance. So the initiative to get a DPA program that's invested specifically in that and only that was awarded $718,000 in ARPA funding. Bank and Trust is managing that program. We have made a couple of changes that have improved their ability to get people that are eligible for this assistance. To date, they've done 5 houses, have assisted 5, low-income households with DPA, totaling almost $100,000. And 31 households have been identified. So the two things that we did was we increased the area median income qualification in a qualifying census tract from 80% up to 120%, and also allowed from $25,000 DPA up to $45,000 DPA. So that really did open up the door for them to find more people that qualified to get this assistance. They have partnered with other nonprofit developers, Athens Land Trust, Habitat, and Athens Housing Authority, but they have identified numerous households external of those and they are very confident that that money's going to be gone, and it's going to be gone well before the December 2026 deadline. So here is the written out numbers. I don't know that it goes back all the way back to 2019, Commissioner Johnson, but we do have a home mapping system that's publicly available to look at for all of the houses that go back much further that have been funded with CDBG and home funding to get single family units developed. But the Athens Housing Authority was awarded 1.02 million with FY25 home funding to develop 4 units and provide DPA in Savannah Heights. They were also awarded FY26 home funding to do 2 more home buyer units with down payment assistance in Savannah Heights, but they also are going to use CDBG funding to support DPA outside of that as well. But it's kind of a double subsidy, actually. So what they're able to do is use home and CDBG so that they can really get a bigger bang for that DPA buck and get people who normally wouldn't qualify for assistance into housing. So it's a really good way to make sure that lower income households are getting assistance. They were awarded $170,000 in FY25 CDBG funding for that purpose. And they were also awarded 26 funding to support the home development projects and to do the DPA assistance. Athens Land Trust was awarded $210,000 for FY25 home, and that's to do 1 single family unit with DPA. They also were awarded FY25 CDBG and FY26 CDBG to support home development projects, ARPA development projects, and DPA for up to 8 households. And they were also awarded general funds. You did dedicate $100,000 in general funds to support housing counseling activities, which was included as a suggestion, a tool in the AHIS. So you met that challenge and they were awarded FY25 and FY26 funding to carry out certified housing counseling. And then East Athens Development Corporation was also awarded $25,000. And my apologies, HOME is Home Investment Partnerships Program. It's HUD CPD funding. CDBG is Community Development Block Grant funding, which is also HUD CPD funding. And EADC was awarded FY26, FY25 and 26 general funds to carry out certified housing counseling assistance.
Linda, for the Athens Housing Authority, for that double benefit, can you describe like the family, like a family, typical family that would benefit from something like that? Like, okay, how many children, like what does that family look?
When you talk about AMI, it's based on the number of people in each family. When you talk about developing, how much it costs to develop and subsidize one single family home, we're talking anywhere from $300,000 subsidy to a $350,000 subsidy, which someone that has 80, 60% or 30% area median income is not going to be able to afford. They may make anywhere up to, depending on how many people they have in their household, average 30% is less than $35,000 annually. You could get up in even into the $80,000, $90,000 annually, but if you've got 5 people in your household, that doesn't go as far. Right, yeah. So the benefit of the CDBG and the home double allocation is that we put in a subsidy of maybe $220,000 to build it, and then another maybe 25,000 CDBG and 25,000 home, that's $50,000. So that drops the cost of that house even further. So rather than having to sell that house for $200,000, they can maybe sell it for $150,000, which is a lot more affordable for a lower income family. So that's the beauty of that double subsidy.
And just on the down payment thing, the assistance front, median home right now is about $350,000.
Correct.
So that's a $65,000 down payment. I'll be very honest, I don't have that kind of money in the bank.
That's a good.
I was gonna just add, I just like bringing good news, but an elderly lady who was living with her kids, she went through EAD's home buying training.
Oh, the housing counseling?
She also got her mortgage from First American.
Perfect.
She has bought and closed last week, or the week before last, on a duplex.
Isn't that wonderful?
She lives on one half. Her mortgage is $1,300. The other half is paying $1,200.
Yeah, rental, right?
So what she pays is $100 a month.
Yeah.
And that's how you create wealth. And, you know, and this is an example of government working with a private sector to help. So I don't know why they're not publicizing. I'm publicizing, but
Well, one thing that I failed to mention, it's interesting to note, is that CDFIs are common for running affordable housing funds. That's what you see. It's prevalent because not only can they manage local funds for the purposes of affordable housing development, but they can also tap into other federal sources of funding to support affordable housing development. We only have one certified CDFI in Athens-Clarke County, and it's only been recent, and that is First American Bank and Trust. So, you know, things are happening and it's exciting to see. But for those that don't do well with a lot of words, these are very quick visuals of the information I just shared with you. It's just in pie charts. So it just breaks it down into simple cost and simple numbers of the number of people that have received development or will receive development assistance, DPA, and housing counseling. And then owner occupied rehab. We have the young Athens Land Trust, Young Urban Builders, and Athens Community Council on Aging, Historic Athens, AJMP, all received ARPA funding to do homeowner occupied rehab. The Athens Land Trust YEB program also receives CPP, Community Partnerships Program, general funds to support their Younger Builders program. And Historic Athens also receives CDBG funding to carry out homeowner occupied rehab. Athens Habitat receives CDBG to carry out homeowner rehab. One thing that you'll see coming up is HCD is implementing the AHIS suggestion to increase homeowner occupied rehab up to $10,000 as a grant. So when we release the FY27 CDBG applications, it will include homeowner occupied rehab up to 10,000. What I want to pre-warn you, of course, is that what you'll see is the number of houses that are served decrease, because the money isn't really changing on what we get awarded annually. It's the money that we're awarding is not going to change. It's just they're going to be able to use more to get a bigger bang for their buck. So rather than maybe being able to do 18 homeowner occupied rehab projects at 5,000, they'll do half of that number at 10,000. But it's going to have a longer term impact. So we feel like implementing what the AHIS suggested is the best way to go. So
$5,000 doesn't carry you very far these days.
especially not anymore. No, it certainly does not. And we see a lot of roof replacements. You're not getting a roof replaced for 5,000. It's not going to happen. So we're excited about doing that and getting that implemented. And again, here's just simplified, same thing that you just saw in writing, just in pie charts for those that have an easier time with visuals rather than having to read all that out. And then very exciting news for our single family rehab and infill. Had the pleasure of running into a couple of commissioners at the Land Trust, Athens Land Trust ribbon cutting on August 1st. They had 5 brand new homeowner units. All the home buyers were there. The houses are beautiful. And let me remind you that the other 3 to the right are home houses. So every house on Dublin Street has a subsidy in it. They're all affordable. They're all long-term affordable, but they've all come from county initiatives. They have 2.75 million in ARPA. They have 5 that are built, and they're going to move to West Henderson to get the other 5 built. And Habitat had their first ribbon cutting on March 26th. These are, remember, they did a scope of work that you approved. So the first 5 houses that are building are right around Micah's Creek. They're not directly in it, but they are right there around it. And so they've got the 1 that's done. They're working on 4 that should be coming online extremely soon. They're trying to overcome a little bit of infrastructure shortage, and we're trying to look at ways that we can try to help them meet that so that they can get the other 5 units developed in Micah's Creek. But both of them are using ARPA funds, and Habitat was awarded FY25 home funding to support infrastructure and FY26 home funding to support the development of 4 single units in Micah's Creek directly. So we've got some good things coming online. And again, we do have a public facing home website page that I'm pretty sure the manager's office shared with you, but we can do again, that you just click on that link and you can see all the houses that have been developed with home funding as far back as, I think, 2015, as far back as 2015. So got a lot of those housing units. Now, these are the things that are still on the to-do list. So for all the good work that's being done, there's still some stuff that hasn't been done. Again, the redevelopment of public housing, we do have one in our history, but nothing right now until the Housing Authority is able to shift their focus from all of their current LIHTC projects going on. That's going to be something that's on hold. We do have the idea of strategic code enforcement. And so this is possibly something that we can look at incentivizing property owners different ways. We do have a voluntary demolition program for low-income property owners that can't afford to demo a unit that's just in terrible shape, that code enforcement sends to HCD to support, but there's a lot of stuff. So what we talked about is we have all of these housing partners that are doing homeowner occupied rehab. We've provided code enforcement with that list so that they can maybe share that with homeowners. And hopefully, if we could continue to expand the homeowner occupied rehab assistance funding, we can get even more people and we can kind of get code enforcement in there to help get that word out.
Did that include like land acquisition of nuisance abatement properties? That are no longer tied up in heirs property that could be used as affordable housing? Is that like
The land bank.
That would be the land bank.
okay.
So I feel like something's missing from the code enforcement bubble there. The enforcement of the single family housing ordinance as far as like student housing moving into single family neighborhoods and taking those units off the market for regular folks.
Well, that's certainly something that can be added to that to do.
I mean, it's
Code
a
enforcement
problem
review.
and an increasing problem.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Another huge problem that Athens-Clarke County has, and a lot of Georgia has, is title clearance heirs property. You have got so many properties in Athens that are tied up with 30, 50, 100 and something owners. And there's just no way to get in touch with everybody. And the problem that we have with this is not only does it hinder their ability to sell a property, it hinders their ability to even get homeowner occupied rehab assistance. Because say you have 5 heirs that own that property, doesn't matter that one's living in there. If the other 4 don't give permission and actually fill out paperwork saying they don't live there, so we don't count their income, we can't touch those properties, unfortunately. So it's a really difficult issue and a lot of people are dealing with it. So there are actions, there are places that assist with this, but there really needs to be more because of the number. There are a few things, the Housing Authority can help with, what is it called? Oh my gosh.
Friendly condemnation.
Yes, friendly, not just that, but county doesn't like to do it. It's taking eminent domain. Thank you. They do friendly eminent domain. So if someone comes to them and wants to sell a property, they're able to help with that eminent domain. But that doesn't touch how many properties out there are just have multiple owners. So it's something to consider as how do we start to tackle that problem and really help homeowners get those issues cleared. Another is voluntary landlord registry. You cannot require landlords to register in the state of Georgia, so it would have to be voluntary, and you would have to figure out a way to encourage them to do that, to participate, because it would be that they pay a nominal fee for their rental units, but it provides their incentives. Maybe there are small tax reductions. Maybe we help advertise vacant properties. There's different ideas that are mentioned in the AHIS of how to initiate a voluntary landlord registry. The one thing that has to be considered is how much management this would require. So this is not something that any existing ACC staff could do with all the other work. It would have to be a dedicated person or persons managing that landlord registry, because it would be a bear.
How is, help me with this? How does that with affordable housing? Because that registry would, like, how is this helping?
Holds them accountable to code enforcement standards, holds them accountable to, especially if they are managing affordable housing rentals, that they're following the rules there, that they are really bringing in people that are LMI qualified. There's several different things that code enforcement really is the biggest thing that it supports. It's, when you think about some of our naturally occurring affordable housing units, they're not real great. I mean, they're just not nice. They're not what I would want anyone to live in.
Okay.
And this would hold them landlords more accountable. It might also support those landlords that live out of state, hold them more accountable for properties that they're not personally here to manage and oversight.
So it's sort of a seal of approval.
I-
We're doing good stuff.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like our neighborhoods that have been zoned RN that are by all other accounts are single family neighborhoods. if they were to go back to single family zoning and then require a special use permit to go above that, no more than two unrelated, that would effectively be a registry
Mhm.
and a means of accountability.
So I mean, it could be, there are different ideas of what that could look like. So it's just a matter of figuring out if that's something that we're interested in doing, what do we want that to look like and how do we get it started and implemented? Another is wealth building. I read an incredible article over the weekend, shared it with my team, that Clarke County High awarded $1,000 in investment money to all seniors, and they're going to manage those portfolios throughout the year. That is a perfect example of wealth building. So there are different concepts and ideas for how to help wealth build so that you help housing affordability, connecting low-income households with programs that can help them increase their income so that they're not so cash strapped, so that they are more qualified for potential home buyer, or so that they're just not living paycheck to paycheck. So there's different ideas, different things that you could do with wealth building, but
You have a lot of great programs you're talking about. Every Wednesday, I meet with a group of individuals, volunteer, that are, out of the 13, 12 are unhoused and some of them live together in various apartments or, couch surfing. But these programs are really great. How do people find out about them through your office? Not a nonprofit, but just through your office. I mean, like, where do you advertise or how do you?
we have on our website a link that they can go to that connects them to all of the different resources we're aware of. We also connected them to United Ways 211, which keeps an extensive database of all the services and programs that are available in Athens-Clarke County and can give them that connection. But if they call, we always will look up what they need and provide them with contact information. And then, our partner agencies also have that information. So if they don't reach out to us, they could certainly go to one of the partners and get that very same information.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Melinda, on this, where would, like tying these affordable housing initiative ideas in here with the wealth building of, I'm thinking about the other set of programs that all have to do with reducing utility costs that are coming through the state and the power company and the sustainability office. Because if you're reducing how much you have to pay for power, you're going to have more money to pay for this. Is that anywhere? I'd like to kind of connect that in this grid here because it's like that helps with housing affordability as well that's going on. So
it could be included in that. I would say that a good example of wealth building could be where you have a business, an industry that comes into Athens-Clarke County and they agree to not only hire LMI or train and hire LMI individuals, but maybe they also build housing to support their employees. And a number of those units would be for the LMI employees. So that might be an example of wealth building, or just simply that they have an on-site training course and certification that if you finish this successfully, we will hire you into this job. That would be an example of wealth building, which would then increase their income and make things more affordable, especially housing.
Melissa.
Yeah, I feel like there needs to be another box here that's kind of an appendix that's a planning and zoning to-do list as far as rezoning, coming up with a category for smaller lots, dealing with that RM/RS conundrum we have in some neighborhoods.
It ties into one of the former strategies. So these are things that are specifically called out in the AHIS, but it does talk about zoning
There is like.
in the homeowner.
But for us to consider and maybe a charge be given to the planning commission, because I also feel like when we are faced with upzoning, residential upzoning, we could apply some pressure to have that developer take advantage of inclusionary zoning.
Future land use will be coming to you in the next couple of months.
Yeah, and then going into the voluntary inclusionary zoning, so we have that, but it's not really, it's only been triggered once. So maybe it talks about calibrating the existing ordinance. So maybe decreasing what triggers density bonus. That might increase the number of properties that would be able to either develop affordable housing or trigger a payment in lieu of payment, but also maybe considering expanding it beyond the downtown area. So there are different things that you could do to calibrate the existing policy. And it also talked about incorporating single-family homes into voluntary. So again, that density, that's what you're kind of talking about, is where right now some of the zoning only allows for one house within a certain, this may allow for two.
Well, in the street
Same
frontage.
size.
Okay, what's next? What's next?
All right, so the mayor charged GIT committee to carry out a review of the recently completed AHIS, make recommendation actions that the mayor and commission can take from that document. So GIT committee met on August 4th to review the AHIS and discuss the mayor's charge. 4 subcommittees are in the process of being developed, and each one will consider a primary category related to rental or housing. And then subcommittees will present the ideas. They'll work together external of the normal GIT committee meetings, and they will come back to the GIT committee in February 2026 to present those ideas. And the ones that they approve will then be presented to you as a body at the work session, May 2026. That's it.
Any questions didn't come up in the context of this? Dick?
Yeah. Yeah, you've done a really good job. Meetings that you've been in, the groups you spoke to about the number of affordable housing that we have available. I think we need to put that out there because, as you all know, people saying we're not building enough affordable housing. We need to know right now how many affordable houses do we actually have in this community? And what's the future look like? I think sometimes we need to set some realistic goals. Say, over the next 3 years, we're building for apartments, for homes. I think those things need to be out there. I think we need to really push that agenda because, as you all can really obviously the commission meeting, people saying we're not getting enough. We know we got a waiting list at Dexter Heights. So we need to put that information out there. So I'd like to see somewhere of some type of notice going, so we got X number of affordable that we have built over the last 5 years. And what is anticipated moving forward.
We started that with that home map. It has all of the ones that have been developed since 2015. And it also has the ones that are online that have been awarded and are pending. We're planning on expanding that to include our LIHTC project. So it'll get bigger. So we are working on that front facing, telling that story.
Patrick, Kara?
Okay, notes here. So if we are working with our partners to develop affordable housing, why do we charge them for connection fees? Is that mandatory? Is that required? And why are water connection fees so expensive?
That's not the purview.
And we've written off a lot of that by policy now.
But even 30% of $4,000 for $5,000 for connection fee per home is expensive. If we're trying to give people in homes, I don't know the parameters behind like why it costs that much. Is it engineering? Is it types or whatnot? But just looking at ways to, to make homes more affordable so people can pay more. The other one is more of a statement and a question. So developers are not developing for Athens. They're not developing for affordable housing. It's mostly short-term rentals, student housing. That's where all the money making. Inclusionary zoning is helping, but are there other tools in the toolbox that you can think of that we can entice more partnerships and all that stuff? And if I'm correct, if we're trying to meet the 880, it's going to cost $1.6 billion.
Yeah, that's the estimate. And it would take a long
time. So with that considered, what can we do to, because like Commissioner Fisher said, like, people want to know what are we doing for affordable housing? And we're not building, well, our developers are not building for affordable housing. Are there any other incentives that you know from other counties or partnerships or anything we can, because like the 20, I counted 24 home units last year, not enough. That's
Well, I mean, one of the things that's been talked about, and I, totally agree, is that private developers trying to get them to step up. Of course, they're in the business to make money, and we understand that. So we've got to figure out a way to make it worth their while to not only develop market rent housing, but affordable housing as well. So we have to come up with some incentives that would entice them to agree to do that. Unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of control over DCA and their criteria for LIHTC, and they just are not big on supporting developers that they haven't approved in the past. And for Athens, it seems that if you're not connected to the housing authority, your chances of getting approved are very low. However, we can look at ways that as long as if the county is supporting them, especially with the Affordable Housing Fund, if there is potential for them to get extra points because they have a loan in place, which shows that we're supporting that project to come into Athens, then hopefully they would be more competitive for LIHTC, because that's where your biggest number of affordable rental units is going to come from, is LIHTC development. But I'm hopeful that that Affordable Housing Fund, once it starts generating, because it's loans. So once we start actually getting that money out there and the money starts coming back, that we will be able to entice private developers, maybe without going through LIHTC, just private developers that if they take out a loan through the Affordable Housing Fund, that they will develop a certain number of affordable housing units.
And my last one is EADC. I thought one of their primary jobs was to tackle arrears. That seems to be a persistent, seems like a simple, easy.
Tackle what?
Arrears.
Tax arrears.
Arrears. That one. So tackle arrears. It doesn't look, it looks like ALT, they do it, but then, that's not their primary goal. And I'm just asking a question, is that one of their primary goals is to tackle arrears?
Not with our funding.
Okay.
I mean, it's possible that is in their strategic plan that they do as an agency itself, but currently none of our funding supports that activity.
Okay. Thank you.
And Patrick, one thing I know, kind of talking with the development community, is they look at their capital funding stack for any project. If you want some affordable units in there, basically have to insert dollars into their stack. Now, one way that Mel mentioned just a couple of minutes ago when you saw those boxes is modifying the way that we do the inclusionary zoning plan. If we would say beyond downtown, you could do a payment in lieu to get a density bump, then we could take those dollars and with favorable developers, we could say, well, we can plug dollars from downtown project X into this thing over on Atlanta Highway. And that's basically what they need in order to make the numbers.
They're working well. If ACD like, hey, developer, some of our top developers, there's someone out in the community saying we have this pot of money, we have these tools in the toolbox to help.
We do, and one of the complications with HCD money is it's federal money.
Yeah.
And a lot of private developers don't want to go anywhere near the red tape and bureaucracy that goes along with home and CDBG funding. So the beauty of the Affordable Housing Fund is that it has less red tape. That's the whole point of it, is an easier source of funding to tap into to support development that doesn't have the numerous red tape barriers that are created by federal money.
Stephanie and Melissa, Carol, yeah.
I just have one question, one statement that I hear all the time. I attend a lot of meetings and we've never defined what affordable housing is. I never use that phrase. It actually makes residents irate because we're trying to say it's affordable and they know what they earn per hour. And so it's, I'm not saying we can't say that anymore. I never say it, but it's to say that we're working on affordable housing. That looks different for every single person. And
It's based on the funding.
It's based on how much a person earns per hour. There may not be anything affordable in Athens, Georgia for someone that's making $17 an hour.
Agreed. Yeah, no, for HCD and our our federal funding, the income limits are defined by HUD. Our affordable housing, what we define as affordable housing is defined by HUD. It is 80% or below AMI that they determine. So that comes straight from them.
I agree.
So the Affordable Housing Fund, though, could use different criteria. It does not have to use HUD criteria to determine what is considered AMI. But again, if you go through LIHTC, they're using a standard, and it's usually HUD standard of what AMI, what affordable housing looks like. So it really is tied into what is the funding.
Is it possible to do education on that? Because people who don't have the means may not have the education to navigate these nuances of the different programs. I'm learning more as you continue to educate us, but I don't know it well enough to repeat it. But is there a campaign maybe, or one sheet that, maybe next year or something could be put together for those that want to understand how to benefit, or if they fit somewhere?
Yeah, I can go back to the Community Engagement Division and ask them if that's a training module that they can create.
Okay.
But we do have a packet that when we do community engagement, we take out with us, and it has a list of all of the partners that we have that we're funding and what they do and their contact information. So it can be kind of expanded from that.
So Patrick brought up incentivizing private developers. When we adopted the affordable housing strategy and created the CDO, we mentioned soliciting private funds, donations. Atlanta's made great progress in their affordable housing stock because they're getting tons of corporate money and donations. We don't see that. Any donations and private money goes into putting names on buildings at UGA, and that's part of the reason UGA can slap them up so quick. What mechanism can we turn to solicit that kind of funding to put into our affordable housing investment fund that we can use to incentivize these developers?
I don't know, that almost falls into the legal realm, because I don't know if a donation turns into and follows the same laws that the gratuities clause oversees. So I don't know. It's possible that if you were able to get a lot of your philanthropic providers already have designated projects that they're doing. They're putting money out there to the community, but it's very specific what they're putting that money into. So trying to find those that may have or want to invest in affordable housing, and then having them maybe put it in the affordable housing fund, so it avoids.
This is like at the tip top of the needs in our community.
You might talk to the community foundation about the idea of a real estate investment trust that's kind of directed toward affordable low market rates.
Just a piggyback. Remember we went to Gainesville, because I wrote this down. Gainesville was a perfect example of how to have nonprofits and businesses contributing to that homeless situation and to that affordable housing. Maybe we can just piggyback off of what they're doing.
Carol.
Yeah, I'm really glad we had this session. In terms of information, just a little thing, like I find myself wanting to take what we've done and putting it into a one-page spreadsheet, so I have it right there rather than all these pages. So if there's some way to do that. I'm also thinking about this, and this is a question like Patrick's getting about private, about the marketplace and building and so forth. I feel like whether or not we as a government, I kind of think it's we as a government, but me as a commissioner also need this bigger message, because I think we are trying to, of our role in addressing housing. Because when you look at those numbers, it's so huge, and what we're doing is admirable and good, but it only takes a little bit of a bite, and we're not, the last thing people are wanting is for us to all have government funded housing. I mean, that's not what we in this country and community and state do, right? So it's defining, communicating what our role is as a community to everyone who's coming to us. And so, I mean, it sounds like the biggest role is in the private world. And so the question is, and one, we can provide little bits of things to help out and incentivize. Because the number, now that number you all used before for how much it would cost, I don't know where that number came from, but it's very effective.
The HIS.
Yeah, and that's an effective number to say that's what we're talking about. And this year we have $6 million. That's really short of that other thing. But what I want to know as well is are there, there's a student housing interest, business building interest. There are people who specialize in high-end housing. There's people who specialize in senior housing or in schools. Is there an industry that specializes in what sort of housing for the middle to lower income folks? And we're trying to attract them, but how big is that industry? I mean, that's just for me to know or not. I mean,
Those are the people who do LIHTC deals.
Right, but it's not like
The Columbia River.
it's not there, so, in terms of finding property, we can have the property that we sell, like Allison is talking about, that we can go out and get people to go after that. But we're competing with all these other developers of student housing, of high-end housing, that are coming in looking at the properties to buy. Is there anyone looking at all those properties to buy to build the housing for our mid to lower income folks in Athens? And so it seems to me like we're running, like there's a pool of land and it's getting smaller and smaller because there's all these other people grabbing it. So some of this, in my understanding, is there's our role, what we can do, and the messaging is real important. Just there's some things I'm thinking about.
I could connect you to a couple of people in that industry. They can talk to you about how they do site selection and that kind of thing.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also, I guess there's more of the other ones the other kind of industry.
All right, y'all, we got one presentation left. Thank you, Mel. Appreciate it very much. Bruce, Lonnee, wake up. We get to return to a favorite topic of this body, the short-term rental ordinance. And Lonnee has the strength of character to bring this to us. Good to see you, sir.
Oh.
I think you can keep us dancing.
Is that, I'm actually driving, it's not so much. Okay.
He likes it.
Yeah, sketch.
I mean, it's interesting.
Okay.
You put mine back up.
Did?
You did.
Yeah.
There you go.
There's a little bit of lag.
Okay. All right. Appreciate having the opportunity to come to you today and talk about short-term rentals. We are in a listening mode right now. I can tell you from a staff standpoint, this is a great spot to be in. We want to hear what your concerns are, give you some things to react to, and then we want to get about the work of drafting those solutions based on your input. In this instance, you also asked the Planning Commission for some input. So I'm going to present that today, specifically related to short-term rentals. But before I do that, I want to talk about the ordinance features that we already have in place. There's a lot of terminology in there. The original ordinance was 23 pages long. Y'all adopted an amendment to that ordinance in June that added another 8 or modified 8. A lot of moving parts. And we've got 18 months under our belt of working with what was adopted. So it's a good time to kind of take a breath and let's talk about what we have first before we start making changes. But we know changes are things that we need. So the ordinance that we have in place right now creates 2 types of short-term rentals you can do following a process. And in many cases, it's by right, right? So there's 2 types. This isn't talking about the legal non-conforming ones yet, so we'll get to that in a second, but there are home occupation short-term rentals and there are commercial short-term rentals. The differences are noted in this slide. A home occupation short-term rental requires that the applicant operator of the short-term rental be the owner occupant of the property or a long-term tenant of that property. And you can only have one on that subject parcel, one short-term rental. So you can't have a complex and function as a home occupation. That's different. Home occupation short-term rentals are allowed pretty much everywhere where we allow for any other home occupation type of business, whether that's a beauty salon, a daycare, your home office, your online business. We treat those the same. So it focuses largely on our single-family residential zones. All right, you can do those by right. It's a administrative process. You work with staff. We've got some things you have to prove. But you get that home occupation approval, and then you go down to the finance department and take care of all your other paperwork to function as a home occupation business. The difference with commercial STRs is they're not subject to those limitations. So the owner occupant, the long-term resident aspect is not necessary. You really function more as a leasable spot for someone to spend the night or spend the weekend or spend a week. The time frame for short-term rentals is still 30 days or less. So we're not talking about what that long-term tenancy is, which is over 30 days. But a commercial short-term rental doesn't require somebody to actually live there and have that as their primary residence. The current ordinance also sets up a special use permit expectation for commercial, not home occupations, but the commercial STRs. If you're in an RM, the mixed density residential, if you're in the employment office or the AR zones. Y'all have heard a few for the RM. You've heard one for AR. So far, we've had 2 special use permits approved for commercial short-term rentals, one in the AR, one in the RM. Point is the ordinance that was adopted in February of 24 put in place a sunset period for those short-term rental operators that were functioning and on record to be functioning between September 20th of 2022 and September 19th of 2023. And the very first thing we had to do after adoption was to get to work in developing that list of legal non-conforming short-term rentals. The thing to remember about legal conforming short-term rentals is they don't have to get permits. They're legal by right to continue functioning. They still have to pay taxes. They still have to have their occupational tax certificate. But there is no permitting required if you're already considered legal, but non-conforming. The way the ordinance is set up, though, is once that list was established, you only get that status for 2 years, and that's the sunset period. So the thinking there was at the end of 24 months after the list was created, that operator's got to make a decision. You know, during that 2 years, frankly, they make a decision to come forward and get a permit and come off that list, and now they're legal and conforming, and then they don't stay on that list anymore, or they cease operation at the end. It's their choice. So coming through this program, we did some analysis right off the jump and identified where we have short-term rentals that are operating. We entered into a contract with a company that essentially scans the internet for listings, and that's where this data came from. So this is a heat map of all the short-term rentals, commercial, home occupation, permitted, unpermitted, didn't matter. Whatever was on the web, it's on this map. Of those, we went through the legal non-conforming list creation process, and we ended up with this map. And it looks kind of similar. We have 7 in terms of distribution. Geographically, it's remarkably similar. 711 properties are listed as legal non-conforming today. That legal non-conforming list was finalized on March 1st of this year. So from March 1st of 2025 to March 1st of 2027, there are 711 properties that get to function without needing a permit. There are some key things that happen along the way. If the property changes hands, they come off the list. If they get a permit, they come off the list. When we originally did the scan, we had, I believe, 890 some odd legal non-conforming. And so in the process of that and truthing that list, we got people to come to permit. They came off the list. We got some folks saying, I'm not operating anymore. I'm not interested. They came off the list. And so that's where we ended up with the 711 that we have today. Those people are neither home occupation nor commercial STR. They're just legal non-conforming. So we don't know in what category they fall.
They function right now without a permit. So you can almost think of them as a third category of short-term rental. Okay,
How many conforming ones do we have?
how many conforming? So we have two commercial short-term rentals that are conforming, two. One AR, one RM that y'all have approved. That came through as a special use, I should say. I think we've got 6 that have come through plans review that didn't need a special use. And then we have 107 home occupation short-term rentals.
Now, is there any Venn diagram overlap between the 711 and the 100 and change home occupation?
No, there wouldn't be, because once you get a permit, you're off that list.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe a corollary question of that 711, do you know how many have homestead exemptions where going into the future, they would be able to be the home occupation?
When we ran the numbers, there's a couple hundred that do not have homestead exemption out of the 711.
Okay. So the bulk of them are homesteaded properties.
That's right. So where we find ourselves after 18 months of adoption is we had a text amendment in June. A portion of the text amendment was adopted by the Mayor and Commission. You acted to change the definition of parcel so that it now refers to tax parcels. So that picks up condominium type parcels. And you've also approved a change to our noticing requirements, which was super helpful. A bigger clarification of how we send notice to neighboring property owners. That was part of what was adopted. What was proposed that was not adopted was revisiting the sunset clause and also the proposition of a relief valve to the sunset clause. And the commission defined option that was approved took those 2 items, carved them out, and sent them back to the Planning Commission for discussion. And I can give you the feedback that we received. That discussion was last Thursday, so that was the next available agenda after the June voting session that y'all had. So we did talk about it Thursday night. We also had the Planning Commission wanting to look at 3 topics, and they had asked staff to develop those. So we folded those together into the one presentation last Thursday. And that's what we're bringing before you today is the results, those 5 topics. So requested by y'all, revisiting the duration of the sunset clause for the legal non-conforming short-term rentals, the 711, to revisit the necessity of having a relief valve as it relates to an extension that would be specific to each property for a sunset clause. If somebody demonstrated they needed more time to make their investment-backed expectation come to life out of that acquisition, that's what the relief valve is for. The Planning Commission wanted to look at licensing of short-term rentals. They wanted to discuss enforcement of the short-term rental regulations and the operation expectations that we have for that. And then they wanted to talk about the special use review criteria that relate to short-term rentals and which direction might be the best way to go in revisiting special use approvals for those. All right, so I'm going to walk through those really quickly. Obviously, these are set up topic by topic. So I would expect us to maybe stop on each of these if we want to have discussion before we move on, if that's fair. But yeah.
I've had lots of discussions about this with a couple planning commissioners. I feel that licensing of short-term rentals is a no-brainer. And that would allow us better access to regulate them.
Well, let's have the conversation kind of with the slide associated with it. So
we'll get to that.
So we're going to be there in a minute. So hey, put a pin in that and we'll get back to it.
So the green items were the ones y'all asked us to work on with the Planning Commission. So we're going to deal with those first. The first item was to revisit that duration of the sunset clause for the 2 years that was adopted in February of 24. And the question simply was it too short or too long? And the Planning Commission discussion was very quick on this. They all felt pretty strongly that it was too short. So that begs the next question. What are the advantages of a longer time frame, and what should be that duration? So staff put together this prompt. Are there advantages to a 5-year, a 7-year, or a 10-year time frame? And Planning Commission's response was, yeah. There are advantages to each of those, but the key here is making sure there's sufficient length to diminish or eliminate the need for the relief valve altogether. What we are anticipating we would do is actually use the relief valve to run a model on a variety of properties so that we can figure out what is that time frame? Because that was the point of the relief valve in the first place, was to spit out a number for how long it would take you to make back that investment back to expectation and kind of deal with some of the legal issues that come from having a use category that people were using that wasn't regulated suddenly get regulated. We've got to honor the fact that some folks were operating legally and made decisions about a business legally prior to any kind of use regulations being put in place. So the other thing to think about with the answer to the second question that's on the screen, if we were to change the duration in the ordinance to 5 years, and let's say we're going to keep March 1st of 2025 as the start date, we're still talking about legal non-conforming, not every single short-term rental. This is just the legal non-conforming ones. To be considered legal non-conforming, you had to be operating between 2022 and 2023. So if we make it 5 years from March of 25, you can automatically add 2 years to that. So effectively, an operator's had 7 years. If you make it a 7-year window or longer, if you make it a 7-year window, it's 9 years, right? So each year is an opportunity, not a guarantee, but an opportunity for that short-term rental operator to have made a profit, to have made something out of this operation, out of this business. Staff hasn't landed on a firm recommendation. We definitely want to hear from you all on this particular topic, but maybe I pause there about sunset duration, and if it's all right, Mayor, if we just discuss that topic for now.
Yeah, sunset.
I kind of need to hear more of what you want to talk about.
Okay.
Questions?
I mean, I don't know yet.
I have a question on that sunset. I mean, because I listened to your discussion the other night, and you were basically saying that the relief valve map formula was something that you all felt secure enough to use it to come up with what your advice would be, 5, 7, 10, or whatever else. Well, if that's the case, can't it still be used? And I know the committee was like, the planning commission was like, oh, no relief valve. But if there's a formula to fill out, which is complicated, but it's not that complicated if you're the owner to fill out, why can't you continue to use that? If it's good enough for you to use to set this length, why couldn't we still keep that in place for people, keep it as low as possible, whether or not it's 5 or 2 or 3? I mean, 2 might be too many. That'd be, maybe there'd be too many coming in for you to administratively hold. But why not make it in the shorter length? Not have it go to 10 or a lifetime like some people were suggesting, or 50 years, but have it at 5 and then use that relief valve for, use your formula, get your formula and do it administratively.
Yeah, I mean, that is part of the discussion is does it still have some utility? I think
But you seem to be saying it has utility for you all to set up what would be a good relief, what would be good sunset. So you're not saying like that formula is like crazy. You're saying it's a good formula to use to figure out something.
we feel like the relief valve formula, and we spent a good bit of time developing it, and we had really good third-party assistance in pulling it together. They don't have any skin in the game. They just want to make sure the math worked.
Yeah.
And that it actually functioned in a way that real estate professionals would understand and could defend. So we feel pretty confident that it produces a result at the end of that equation that's defensible, that is fair, and that can be put together by the typical operator of a short-term rental. So if we don't have it as part of the ordinance, as a tool for determining this, we're proposing we just use it as the modeling mechanism to come up with a change in the sunset period. If we extend it, let's use the relief valve to be the modeling mechanism to figure out what is that duration for the typical example or maybe an extreme example, and we can run the number as many times as we want to come up with a proposal on what that time frame could and should be.
Yeah, I think maybe that question also is, it's really a matter of using the relief valve model or calculations once versus, so you do it one time, determine is it 2, 5, 3, 7, 10.
Right.
Or you set it at some fairly arbitrary number, then you use a relief valve every time someone raises the question. I think that's really what it is. It's
Well,
really
no, I think, but
once or you do it.
But I mean, I think if you have the person who says, I need 10 years, we set it at 5 based on your stuff, and someone says, I really need it 10 years, I can prove this, I'm gonna have all those legal suits that are taught, won't they have that to say, hey, you know, they need the longer to extend it and push it.
That was the point. Yep.
Right. So I mean, that it would still be
present.
It would still be present for the expensive place, so why not leave it, use it to set it, but then leave it as a relief valve as well?
Well, and also, thing about these terms, this whole relief valve discussion makes me dizzy. But the thing is, you know, if you're gonna bother with a relief valve, and it's gonna get complicated to manage, it's gonna be difficult on staff's time to manage. The second thing is, if you have a strong licensing program where 3 strikes you're out, but you can't get another license, then that's going to solve a lot of issues. So why not just grandfather in? I hate to even say that, because they're going to be grandfathered in anyway with a relief valve. And what protects us and what protects the neighborhoods would be that licensing thing if there are a lot of problems. So you saw, I mean, why even go down this route if this is in essence grandfathering in?
Which the question on that I had is, can you set up a licensing process that only goes with the ones that are already existing in the single family? Or does it have to be like for all?
No, it's just the ones that are legal non-conforming right now that can get it. But if you have a homestead, you can get a license, or who's ever legal non-conforming right now. But the license also just stays with that particular homeowner. Once they resell the house, you don't get another license for that.
Well, I'm just.
The suggestion is that maybe the licensing would be the more utilitarian tool.
Right.
But I want from the attorney's office, can it be applied only to the ones that, like, we're setting up a licensing process here, but it only applies to, it doesn't apply to anything new, it just applies to the ones that are already existing. Is that a legal thing to do?
Short-term rentals, including commercial ones, for example.
We want to look at it. John, you got any comments on it?
Commercial ones, if you're going to be in a commercial one, you would also need to get a license. That's the thing. Anybody what I'm saying is you don't allow new short-term rentals in single-family neighborhoods, which we don't unless you're a homestead exempted property.
But say if the licensing scheme had a 3 strikes rule, would the strikes apply both in a commercial context and a legal non-conforming?
Well, and I think one thing that we have to remember is that sort of the land use piece of this, like where they can operate, you know, that's really what land use does. It says we have districts, you can have commercials here, you can have home ocs here, that sort of thing. That's a little bit different from the licensing context. And so those are kind of 2 separate questions almost. But in terms of a licensing scheme, as Judd said, I think we'd have to look at it. But I mean, there's at least a possibility what you do in terms of licensing is it would go across the board to any operator who's operating a short-term rental.
Yeah.
Charles' idea of the licensing was to be able to get bad actors.
Yes.
Right.
In commercial and in single family.
So you want to apply, we want to research it, but I think you have to apply it equally across.
Well, that's what I mean. Would you still have to, if you've set up a license, would you have to apply it moving forward?
Even if I own my home, if I'm a bad actor, I'm causing problems, right?
Right, but for a commercial,
I'm causing problems, I'm still a bad actor, right?
But if right now, we don't allow commercial STRs in single family neighborhoods. So would you, for this licensing, would you have to do that for new ones?
That's a separate issue. That's what John is trying to say.
Okay.
Land use, where you allow them, the licensing scheme actually talked about will be another part of the ordinance. Because that's not really, it's more like an alcohol license. You regulate that. If an alcohol dispenser abuses things, there's a procedure to take away their alcohol license. And I think you're looking at the same thing with the STR, right?
But I'm looking at.
Let me give an example. Maybe this will help. Folks over in game day, they would have to get a license. And they would get a license so that we can make sure that if they violate whatever, because people in game day could be some complaints because there are some people that actually live there full time. But you see where I'm going? So people in game day, everybody that wants to do an STR has to get a license, whether or not they're in the commercial district or in the single family district, so that way our folks can maintain and enforcement and make sure that if you get 3 strikes in game day condo, you can't have another license.
Yeah, that's for the new ones. I'm talking about for the grandfather, like the one using it.
Talking about the grandfather one.
But the one, the house, I mean, game day is like the house on Riverbend.
You're asking about commercial. No, game day is downtown.
That is a
Game
commercial,
day is downtown.
but it's a commercial, it's in a commercial zone, but I'm talking about a commercial STR. Because the one on Riverbend is a commercial.
And so Mike's suggesting that the licensing scheme, much like an alcohol license, would be applied across the various types of STRs. And that if you were a bad actor in a single family legal non-conforming STR, you could lose your license. If you were a bad actor in a commercial STR, you could lose your license. If you were a bad actor in a multifamily context that's a condo deal like game day, and and I'm a regular full-time resident in unit 203 and next door in 205, they continue to have these crazy kids who are like shooting holes through my wall, then you could lose your license.
You could. And those licenses needs to pay for the folks that are enforcing it. So you make the license fee high enough.
So that's a little bit of how they dovetail. Is everybody comfortable moving on from this slide now?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because we come back to it, but I want Bruce to be able to articulate.
All right, I'm going to put my thought on my agenda now. I just would like for some explanation about my last STR request, so we can move on. Remember that on Marlin Street?
Yeah.
Okay, we can move on.
Okay. The second question was dealing with the relief. And so in talking this through with the planning commission, the question we put to them was, if the sunset period were extended, is there a need for the relief valve provision? And no, the answer was no. It's not needed if the sunset period is long enough to provide for the investment-backed expectations to be met. But the relief valve equation could be used to model, and that's what we're talking about. So it's not a reason to throw out the relief valve, it's just an use for it. But yeah, I mean, this just summarized kind of what we were talking about with the first slide, honestly. The notion of that relief valve was really to bring some rational measurement to this process and this discussion for those folks that might be making the case that these regulations are harmful to their business, or we have to make some sort of compensatory move for them. This was literally the way to provide for that.
So everybody gets this piece of it?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm thinking about it too much. I like, if you set it at 10 and someone has put in billions of dollars, are they gonna come and we set it at 10 based on your like best case? Are we gonna still have being susceptible for a legal case? If it's at 5, do we have to set it at the upper limit to avoid to being attacked legally?
I would rather not talk about that because that affects, or I would rather advise you that in a minute.
Okay, but that is something.
Office right now.
No, but I mean, to answer this question, we need that legal advice.
Yes.
So that's all. I don't need the answer. I need to know that we need to have that at some time.
Any other questions about the relief valve? Bruce?
Okay. So the items in yellow were things the planning commission had asked staff to talk about, and they did bring up the notion of licensing in their discussions, not just once, but twice. And so what staff is trying to do here is summarize their angle on this. Was the notion of licensing was a request that was intended to provide some improved accounting of the short-term rental uses and to offer an enhanced enforcement opportunity. It allows us to track it more thoroughly. It connects better with our finance process, with the OTCs, the occupational tax certificates. And we also had to make it really clear to the planning commission that licensing exists outside of zoning regulations. We have nothing in the zoning code that deals with licensing. That exists in other parts of Athens-Clarke County's code. So it's an idea that they were asking about, but it's not something that's within their purview to make a recommendation, or certainly not to review the text amendment. But is there interest in a licensing procedure? And their answer was yes. We also made it clear to them that this would also require adoption of the terms of eligibility how to handle an application for such licensing. The alcohol licensing, as an example, has a series of different alcohol licenses, and they are possible in certain locations for certain operations. It's probably accurate to say that short-term rentals would have to have the same sort of consideration, but it would live outside of zoning.
Melissa?
I've got to go in a minute, so I just want to get this off my chest. I'm all for the licensing. I think that is crucial. It's crucial to enabling us to regulate them. It also is crucial that we establish criteria and allow these by right in these RM and commercial zones with some stringent criteria that the planning commission would evaluate. We shouldn't have to see them. But I feel like, the special use permit option could remain on the table for those, almost as an appeal, maybe an appeal process for those that planning commission feels don't meet the criteria, because they might exist in some other context that might make them appropriate. And I'm open to allowing them in RS zones through that special use permit or appeal process. No, for
Commercial as
yeah, in certain, there might be extreme, specific situations where it might be completely appropriate that this little property in a single family neighborhood makes sense as an STR with a license that could go away with violations and would definitely go away if the property were to do. I have a couple examples in mind, especially when it comes to neighborhoods where you have these teeny tiny houses that functioned as STRs or guest houses once upon a time, and at some point in time got separated out.
Agree with that.
Is it my time next one?
You want to talk about the licensing piece?
Yes, well, yeah, I do. So if there's a consensus about licensing, does that also include the monies that they pay for permits? So it'd be like licensing and permit?
So permit fees go into the general fund. They're not earmarked. If they come through the zoning, if planning department fees go into the general fund.
Okay.
So they're kind of indexed differently. If it's something that goes through finance, again, that's a separate discussion to have about how those fees are collected and what they're earmarked.
So there actually is an additional fee with the permit?
One's a fee and the other's a tax certificate. Yeah.
So like the alcohol fee goes into the general.
Mhm.
I'm certainly very interested in modeling a licensing format, like the idea of some clarity for public, for the business owner and for the neighborhood around. Carol?
I am not for licensing commercial short-term rentals in neighborhoods.
Me too.
And there may be some weird exception, which is more like a guest house ADU kind of thing. But I don't want to, the devil is in the details of this. So for me to say I'm for this or against this thing, like what, I don't understand how maybe it's more for the enforcement. So if there are the behavior of bad apples, but the idea that we could have, I have 3 houses across the street from me that, yeah, if I actually it'd be really convenient. I live right there. There's 3 of them for sale. I could buy them all and have a short-term rental thing. And I definitely make enough money to pay those mortgages, right? So, but I don't want our neighborhoods, just like those women who came and talked about the condos in there. I don't want my neighborhood filled with mini hotels, as someone used with us over there. So,
So you're providing counterpoint to Melissa's.
right,
And I agree.
that's some exception, but I don't like even I have to see the details. It feels like we're starting all over again.
Carol, I agree with that. My point though was in the ones that are already on that legal non-conforming list, because they're the ones that we're trying to do this relief.
Right, and that's what that's all. I just wanted to have the legal advice about whether or not we could do that for those and then punish them for the bad behavior.
Yeah, but any new ones like she's talking about, I'm not.
Yeah, so that's the details of this I would need to see. And then how you would deal with I think you'd still have the same question of whether or not you would do it by, I mean, the question of whether or not you'd have them in the RM zones
It's getting there.
is there. It would be the same thing with that, the difference. So, you know, so I think the question of how much the neighborhoods be allowed to go to short-term rentals versus dealing with the bad apples are two different things.
Any other questions about licensing or input on that? All right, Bruce,
Consensus being,
let's model what licensing would look like.
all right, the next topic was the question about code enforcement, just a discussion about how those regulations are working and what are the operation expectations for our code enforcement with this.
I think I want to say one thing about the licensing real quick. I don't know, some of you may remember a long time ago, Athens adopted this rental registry. Well, the legislature passed a law saying you couldn't have a rental registry, and it's still in effect. So Tybee Island has adopted a licensing scheme, and it is being challenged right now in court. We talked to them yesterday, their attorney, getting ready for oral arguments, they're writing their briefs on the basis that that is a rental registry.
Yeah.
So I just want you to be aware that, and there's been a number of communities that have done licensing schemes, Alpharetta, I think, or either Chamblee, Tybee, Brunswick maybe, or Glenn County, but they're actually, Savannah's got 2 lawsuits filed against it over it. So you'll get a memo from us. I just want you, I feel like it's important to just point that out. There's still some legal uncertainty related to that. Doesn't mean we can't do it. A lot of communities have done it. It just bears saying that's the fact right now. And people can file lawsuits anytime they want. Just making you aware. But it's ironically enough, it's when they say being heard.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
When do they think that'll be heard?
So in the Tybee case, I think the briefs on that issue are due next month. And I don't know whether they've scheduled oral argument that or not.
So anyway, but it's ironically enough came from Athens. You remember that?
It was our rental registration ordinance that was challenged. They can't forget it. 2003. Yeah. Still dealing with it. Yeah.
All right.
So enforcement, just touching on how we're doing this. So the first 6 months, honestly, of the program, if not 8 months, was spent on education. We had postings, we had postcards, we had all kinds of information to go out to let current operators know how to get on the legal non-conforming list, the steps involved, working with folks that were identified by the software that we purchased, the rental state software, to send them letters and let them know we have an ordinance. This is what it looks like. If you have questions, please let us know. So enforcement really didn't start out as enforcement. It started as education, which is kind of the posture we have on all of our enforcement, to be honest with you, is educate first before you have to go to the next step. Planning Commission had a lot of discussion about this from the bad apples perspective, and the 3 strikes rule was talked about. They wanted a response to that, and it is, there are details to how that does and doesn't work. We don't really have a 3 strikes rule, as I understand it, anywhere in the code, but it is really kind of the judge's determination on how that works. But the key thing we wanted to talk about here was the notion of revocation of an approval came up during enforcement. And so we took a moment and stopped and kind of pulled those 2 things apart. So a permit for an approved use isn't revoked. A permit can't be revoked. That's not a revocable thing. You don't take it back.
You could actually have special use permit
So that lives in its different part of the ordinance, but the actual permit to operate is not a license, it's a permit. And so what we deal with is if there is somebody who's performing badly, we deal with the performance issues from a code enforcement standpoint. So the analogy we used in the meeting was a grocery store. You issue a permit for the grocery store, but if they stack their boxes by the dumpster, you don't shut down the grocery store until they fix the boxes. Deal with the box. And so right now, we don't have a process, we don't have something in the ordinance that says take back the permit. Licensure is one of those things that does offer that opportunity if it makes sense and if it's legally defensible to do it. That is where a license comes into play. So that was a good opportunity to talk through what a permit does and what a license does. But enforcement in general has been interesting. So 131 parcels, not short-term rental units, but parcels. Some parcels have multiple short-term rentals on them. But 131 parcels have received warnings over the past 12 months. 5 of those have gone to citation. We also, enforcement is looking at this from the occupational tax certificate standpoint. How many of them have an OTC and how many of them don't? So there are 278 active short-term rental OTCs right now. That represents 27% of the short-term rentals that we know to be operating presently. So code enforcement is systematically working through that, how to identify them, how to reach out to them, how to get them square with that annual occupational tax certificate. So 2 different things. Most of the enforcement that goes on is dealing with things like noise or trash or parking, things that you would see that are a part of any kind of residential development. So it's not always directly related to the short-term rental, but we do know of those 131 if we had a parking issue or a trash issue or sound issue. The reason why we're reporting those as short-term rental related is we know that they're operating as a short-term rental. So we just made that connection. If there was a parking issue there, and we also know it's a short-term rental, we just lumped it into the category of being short-term rental code enforcement. So quick numbers, but that's just sort of a heads up on this. We have a dedicated staff person presently, a full-time code enforcement person who works with short-term rentals exclusively. In the budget, you all also approved additional code enforcement that would work outside of normal business hours, and that comes online, I believe, in the new year when the funding hits. So that sort of enforcement arm is growing, and the tools that we're learning that we can use and that are reliable are, you know, that knowledge is growing also. Every time we have one of these, we have to make a defensible case, right? And, you know, learning how to do that with a new use category takes a minute. So how to build the case, how to use the software, how to get those observable violations and strap them together into something that a judge can understand and follow through with a judgment.
Bruce, how many of those 131 are in home occupation STRs versus commercial?
I can find that number.
Because that would be helpful.
Backtrack
Our
it.
assumption here is that when it's a home occupation, there aren't going to be as many problems, I would assume. So I'd love to have the data on that.
Yep. And, you know, the other thing on that split is how many of them have permits? So we may have a code enforcement issue with short-term rental operation that doesn't have permits. And so we may not have a home occupation for it. We may not have approved one. We've only approved 104 home occupation.
Okay.
So, and we've got 130.
Non-conforming could be a home occupation.
That's correct. That's right. All right. Any other questions on the code enforcement side? Okay. And so finally, the last of the 5 topics was looking at special use review process, criteria. Y'all have seen a handful of these come through, and as I noted, there's only been 2 that have been approved so far. The challenge that we've had is trying to apply something quantifiable, something that is quantitative upfront that we can say is a condition of approval or a circumstance that is a reason for approval or a reason for denial. And we're still searching for what that can be. And we feel like if we're going to have something, it's going to take a text amendment to really nail it down. But in the process of looking at this, the Planning Commission's recommendation was to take these out of special use consideration. Instead, put in place criteria on the front end where by right, it's a yes until you reach a certain threshold. Beyond that, it's either not permitted or the only way you can do it is to participate in another type of development program. So let's walk through it. The possible commercial and this would be for commercial short-term rentals. I'll keep saying that. It's not for the home occ type. This is for where nobody's living there. This is just operating as somebody who's spending the night or spending the weekend as a guest. So these could include an allowance in the RM zones or, you know, wherever these are right now as a special use. So allowance for 10% or less of the units in an undivided RM zone multifamily development to be commercial short-term rentals by right. A couple terms in there we need to break down. An undivided RM zone development. It's kind of a new thing we've cooked up while thinking this through. If it's undivided, it's not split into condos. It's still one parcel, one owner, typically one property manager. And those tend to function differently. They have people that are tenants that are turning over annually. There seems to be a qualitative difference to an undivided RM zone multifamily development as opposed to a divided one, which would be like Wood Lake, like the one you saw recently, where that is a multifamily development that has been divided into a series of condos. And what we were hearing from the public and what we were hearing in the discussion was that is more akin to a subdivision, a single-family neighborhood, as opposed to an undivided multifamily development that really functions more like your typical apartment complex.
Let me ask you this about the undivided. Did this topic come up? I see underneath number 2, it may have because you give them a bigger density if they're part of the inclusionary zoning. But y'all, if we have, say we have 10,000 units in this community that want to, you take 10% of that, you're automatically taking 1,000 units out of the equation that could be affordable. So you kind of, by allowing that by right, maybe number 2 would be okay if they're taking part in the inclusionary zoning units on a 1-to-1 ratio, but doing number 1.
So you're thinking 10% is too high?
10% is way too high. That's 1,000 units right there that we're automatic. We need 8,800 from what we just heard in the last presentation.
Sure.
To help with our affordable housing.
So there's a reverse engineering.
That's never going to lower the price. All the stuff planning commission and planning staff is recommending that we build these days.
Yeah.
You're never going to make a dent in affordable housing if you start allowing that.
So one of the reasons we had 10% was part of the thinking is that means you got to have at least a 10-unit development to be able to have one.
Well, I'm saying not allow it.
I understand, but we have a lot of developments around the community that are a house that's been divided into 4 units or an older apartment complex that's only 6 or 8 units. And so they wouldn't be eligible to be a commercial STR with this wording that's on the screen. They couldn't do it because they couldn't make it to the 10%. If you took one out of a 4-unit development, it's 25%. You're over the.
But you're saying down here, divided is not going to be allowed. So those units that are divided aren't going to be allowed anyway.
No, I'm talking about undivided. So if you had an apartment building that had
Like a quad or.
yeah, if it's undivided, like it's not condos, it's one property and it just happens to have 4 units in it. If one of those goes commercial STR, that's 25%. So that's a no, you can't do it.
Bruce, would another way to deal with this in code language be able to say, like, let's not the lower threshold, 5%, but at least one, like if you've got a quad.
You could word it that way if.
And what about her
Sorry.
STR?
Yeah, well, and we're talking about Athens at large. What does that look like? Or do you have data that shows what STRs are looking like in districts?
We can start to break it down by zoning district, you mean? We do have some information on some of the following slides. That's a start towards that question, but are you thinking about the one that was on?
I know some of us are feeling really strong either way. And I'm wondering if it's because of
look at the map.
more areas some districts have more automatic or have more STR. I don't have that many in my district that I know of. I haven't had no complaints like some of the others.
Yeah, if you go back to that first you can see it and you can see there's like more
Graphically.
at first that heat map. So there are fewer in your district. So there's more in Mike's district, there's more in my district.
Probably about half in my district.
Yeah.
From all of them.
But what in the one that you're doing it now, it doesn't address the single family homes in RM districts at all.
So,
like the one we looked at the other day.
so right now it's a special use. They come through and we have to sort it out.
Right, so that wouldn't, the criteria though, we were looking for more criteria, but isn't giving us more criteria.
Well, in a way it is, it would say no.
Why? Which one of those? points?
So if you had an RM zone piece of property and, multifamily development, let's just focus on RM zoning.
Yeah, so I guess the multifamily development, like if it's a single family house and that's not a multifamily development.
Yeah, so we don't have if you're zoned RM, we're counting bedrooms. You're multifamily.
Okay, so I think we need to like clarify that language.
Okay.
For that,
Fair enough.
You're saying anything that's in an RM zone, basically you could do the reverse and you could say, you have to have, according to what you have, not what Kelly said, in an RM zone, you have to have an apartment complex of 10 or more before it's even considered.
Right.
Okay, so that's a little simpler to say.
Now, you can still do the home occupation stuff.
Right, but we don't care.
But I just want to make sure that's.
Yeah, I am always aware of that.
You could have a homestead exemption in an RM zone.
Or just be a long-term tenant.
Different.
You don't have to have a
Right.
homestead.
But there are no special use permits, so that's not difficult.
Well, let me go back to, my situation. I know that planning denied it. The planning commission approved it. Is the planning commission looking at the same things you guys are looking at, or they are looking at where there's an exception or where there's, you're going strictly by the black and white,
That's right.
but so.
Well,
Go ahead.
he has his own interpretation of black and white.
Okay.
I don't necessarily agree with it.
Okay, that's right. So here,
I've made that clear to him, and so has John, but he continues to interpret the way he wants to.
well, I think that on Marlin Street with the surroundings that it is, I think we are doing this applicant a huge disservice. All he's going to do is enhance that community. So how do we fix that? I don't want.
Well, there's not anything to fix. There's a criteria.
Okay.
And you just use the special use criteria, and different commissioners can feel different ways about applying the criteria. And so one commissioner may feel like it doesn't warrant a yes vote to approve the special use. Another commissioner. And each one may be treated differently depending on how the criteria apply.
And that's where.
And I've said that once, but and if that's not what you want, you need to change it because that's the way it is now.
And that's what I need. Everybody, because when you spoke about your situation, I didn't see it in relationship to the situation. So the criteria could
produce different results.
It could produce different results. That's where I was trying to get to.
And certainly that's parallel with what happens in special use applications all the time. You have special use applications for a personal care home. And Mike doesn't care about folks who are the age, so he's just going to deny every one of those. You're really concerned about, that part of the community, so you're going to approve everyone. You've got a sort of understanding of that need. Now, I will say, having watched several of these special use applications unfold in dialogue in City Hall, it's a challenging area of special use. And so my preference as a process question to use consistently would be to either have a by right process under staff criteria, along with that not permitting, but licensing scheme.
What this is.
So we
or just say, no, we're not going to do it at all. Because it becomes very convoluted.
I really think though, and I guess I didn't pay a whole bunch of attention to special short-term rentals. That just wasn't my area of great interest, but it is a big interest and it is growing. And it is becoming an issue. And I do like the fact that
and it is impacting affordable housing.
But let me tell you the same thing I told somebody else. We haven't done affordable housing since I've been on here.
Well, we have. We just saw a presentation.
Well,
We have.
I'm telling you, no, we haven't.
Yes, we have. We just
No,
saw the
I'm
presentation.
gonna argue with you about
Well, I
that.
just saw the presentation where we
guess
have.
what?
So what are you thinking as a solution, Amina?
No, all I'm saying is that now you made me lose my train of thought. But what I'm saying is that short-term rentals has value to somebody somewhere. And we should take in consideration everybody. And we should accept the fact that all votes do not have to be the same for the same reason. That's all I'm saying. I would gladly vote against any short-term rentals in Mike's district. He's having an overflow, he's having a bigger problem than I am. But then when you have a person that is taking a dilapidated, well, it's not totally dilapidated, a poor community and enhancing it, that may bring in, some more housing or fix-up housing. You look at the whole picture. I don't think that one answer suits everybody. And that's the only thing Jeff was saying. And I didn't.
And you would gladly vote against it based upon the application of the criteria.
That's what I'm saying.
I will say, my expectation is that if we continue with the process as it is now, it's probably not going to get any easier. I would continue to expect that there will be continual application and continual tussling with those applications through the special use process. I certainly have some favorability toward going to that sort of licensing criteria where we just say, well, maybe it's going to have 2 per 100 units or something like that. Go do well. We're going to be monitoring you. And we don't have to have a very extended ongoing assumption.
But does that fix my situation?
Well, yeah, your situation would just be handled by right.
Well, yours is going to be followed on the ordinance in place right now.
Right.
That's just the reality.
Yeah, see, that's the other thing.
Right.
Anything else on this piece?
Yes,
Patrick?
so it feel like we're on the tires are not hitting the ground and we're just pedaling away. So know about right, because and I get it, it's laborious for staff, but if you got a unit you got a multi-unit, there may be people in those units who may not want a by right of an SDR. I just think hearing from the public and, that one individual who owns that one unit, I'm in it for the money, but may not care about, family, the mother, that third shift worker so just that by right scares me, but I will email you a lot of questions. Just going back from the beginning, even going back from last year, was it last year? It could have been 2 years ago. What was that? The school board, from when this all started, it seemed like we're not moving. I don't know. Well, it just.
Yeah, no.
It's a relatively new process for us.
No, it is. And when I listened to the meeting, I was like, oh, it seems like we're starting all over again. But I think, I'm thinking through here and I hear Judd's reaction over here. And I think there's the legal argument and the legal concerns where you're looking at lawsuits. And then there's sort of the everyday, fair consistency. So forgetting about the legal thing with the lawsuits and things in terms of treating people fairly, where you have an RM zone and I know that one's, let's just see, it's another RM zone. Where's the one where Linda Davis lives there, where it's just lots of single family houses, but it's an RM zone. But somehow those are going to be treated differently. Forget about the legal part, just in terms of what's right versus my neighborhood. And the idea that I've heard this again and again where someone owns the short-term rental and they're like, well, I keep it up better than my neighbors. Well, that could be used for a lot of houses in my neighborhood. Like a short-term rental person, we keep it, I can tell, I could give you half the houses, the short-term rental person would probably keep it up better as a commercial SDR in my neighborhood. Now, in some other neighborhoods with HOAs, that might be the case, but I don't have a HOA. So there's people who are rough. So I'm thinking about just in terms of the fairness of my making a decision and being consistent versus the legal thing and having some more guidelines so that the person who comes in and is looking at the townhouses on College Avenue and looking at that, and that's RM, but yet there's another RM here, and it appears to the public like where it depends upon who it is, what the presentation is, which commissioner. So I think there's a public perception of fairness as well as the legal fairness. And observation there. Then that's what I need help with as much as the legal part.
Yeah, I'll send some questions too, because I want to do it right. I want to do what will keep as just being in these seats as elected officials, the chaos is never going to go over. It's going to be on one issue or another. But if we can minimize it, I'll be glad to give some conversation to Judge.
This chaos is healthy.
Is there interest in having a by right threshold and then beyond that, a special use or?
Special use.
So, this proposal up there is coming from the planning commission saying special use consideration could be mothballed with a notion of a percentage. 10% was what was put before them. They weren't landing on 10% necessarily, but if that concept of an allowance by right, Mayor, you mentioned 5%, or I think you did, but something along those lines. And then if you're beyond that, the other concept that's on the screen is thinking that if you go north of that by right number up to another percentage, you could do those as inclusionary zoning units at a 1-to-1 ratio. And I think the thinking behind that, which kind of came out of staff's analysis and listening to public comment, we have multifamily developers that are saying those units are cash flowing. The short-term rental units are cash flowing in a way that's advantageous and it's helping with vacancy rates. Well, if we have vacancy rates and we have something that's cash flowing well over here, maybe that's a way to offset the cost and provide an affordable unit within a development.
Then you get back to Mike's thing where he's saying there's a couple of new developments close to me where there might be 60 homes, 60 unit like living spaces, and 6 of them could become short-term rentals. That's 6 rentals less than we have for whether it's students or retirees or just regular people, right? So
What if
that's
5% or 1.
And what developer in Athens, Georgia is like considering, oh, okay, I'm gonna put short-term rentals, I'm gonna build short-term rentals so I can build affordable housing.
I think it would go the other way around.
Well, we don't see that with developers, period. And this is what I guess I'm thinking. Yeah, we heard a good report tonight about housing. It was promising. But I know that we could have done a lot better a long time ago as far as affordable housing is concerned. And I try not to put it out there like that, but that's true. Because I looked at the Girtz report from 2019. A lot of things that are, so what you saw today, we probably should have seen some of that some years ago. So short-term rentals is not the thing that is blocking affordable housing.
It is.
It isn't, it's not that.
When you have.
It's one.
It's one thing. It's one thing. It's not the whole thing. Maybe I should say.
We obviously have this whole ecosystem, kind of all these push and pull levers, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, well, so to what degree do we feel comfortable with short-term rentals being a piece of the built environment? If you feel very uncomfortable with more, just say, well, we're not going to allow them in these undivided multifamily zones. If you feel comfortable with them being a small piece, let's say, okay, let's create a clean by right process where we don't have to rustle over everyone in City Hall.
I think, Kelly, it seems like we're talking out of both sides of our mouth when we're trying to talk about affordable housing and when we get to the resident, RM zoned apartments. If staff and plan commission are approving all these RM1s in the name of building up supply to meet demand so that it drives prices down, if we allow the STRs in those areas where we're trying to keep prices down, it just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know why. Maybe it's just me, but.
I think I'd just be happy
Yeah, that's a question for me. I'm gonna muddy the water here because I can still play the new card because I wasn't here when you tried to create this. I guess a question is, I'm listening to the conversation. A question is, you've got 800 and something roughly non-conforming commercial STRs now, correct? That number's somewhere in there. So, is there an interest? So set those aside for a minute. Is there an interest from the commission to accommodating any additional commercial STRs. You already got the home occupation ones that are moving forward, so those are there. So I guess that's one question. Is there any interest even in accommodating those?
I think not.
Because you could, I guess you could take a position of not going to accommodate any new, meaning you're not taking any new applications, and you license the non-conforming ones that exist, set some 10-year or whatever horizon with those, license them so that over time, even that 800 will dwindle. I mean, we're spending a lot of time, it feels like, trying to figure out a way to permit more commercial short-term rentals. And if there's not that interest, I mean, you know, and that's not to say there's not an interest out in the private sector. There is an interest. I don't want to diminish that. I'm just saying if the result is always going to be special uses that come before the commission and 95% of those get denied, you're effectively saying you're not approving.
And you know what? That is exactly what should happen. We have, yes, I agree. Whatever, all that you just said, we can shut it down now, but folks should not have to pay $850 for a permit and then come before us and we deny it. That's not right either.
That's the chance they take.
No, listen.
That doesn't mean we say yes to them.
Listen. But if we say we're going to deny it and there's no, that pathway is closed, it'll be closed.
If we did that one, is what about the existing, and Bob, what you were just saying, the RM ones that forget about short, single family, because I know that, and I have a constituent with several that are already in existence, and what she's doing is looking at your guy coming in, nice guy, but he's brand new, looks like it's gonna pass, but she's like, I've had this for 5 years and it looks like I'm not gonna pass because of the political circumstances of that. So in your thing, if we say no more in RM, but with the existing ones, what do we do with?
I think you have some legal obligation to deal with the existing ones in some manner.
We don't have a legal obligation to approve any special use permit.
Correct.
For us.
But one.
The grandfathering.
But the ones that have already gotten.
Like if somebody had
They issued a special use permit, which there's only been 3 of them issued, then.
I'm actually thinking of the non-conforming. There is some, you have some, because they were established lawfully, because you weren't regulating them. So you have some obligation to figure out how to unwind, if you will, those activities to some degree.
Wouldn't you use the same thing as you do with the ones in the single family? I mean, you just use the same process.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that would make sense.
So let's let everybody live with this for a little while. We can follow up kind of at our next work session and say, hey, you know, have we landed on sort of a composition? Because I think that's what we.
So give me the takeover, summarize that for me, Kelly.
Well, so we've got multiple pieces here. It sounds like there's a lot of interest in, as I observe, there's a lot of interest in the licensing piece. Everybody likes licensing, whether that's 3 strikes, 2 strikes, or some clear observation of the behavior that happens at that site. I mean, that's certainly what I've gotten from this. If there's licensing, it seems that there's then some interest in saying, okay, well, we have a longer horizon than 2 years on this legal non-conforming.
Kelly, can I bring up a point about that? Because I don't know if I made it clear earlier, and this is to Bob's point. So worried about this 2-year, 5-year, 7-year thing. I mean, by the end of the day, when we put this relief valve in place, we might as well just go ahead and say to those 700, okay, I don't like it, but we're not going to allow any more new STRs. But y'all can be grandfathered in up until the point y'all violate the 3 per things and you're out, or when you sell the property.
I mean, that's effectively.
Effectively what we're doing.
So that's
that's what that would be.
So without having to worry about all the 2-year, 5-year, and 7-year stuff, I'm trying to make it easier on the attorney.
That would make it, I think, the most simple.
That's what Bob, he was just telling me what to marinate on. That's what I asked him.
Okay.
So, the sticky wicket, the place where they're not conclusive is, what to do in these undivided multifamily properties. But that just rest in your minds and hearts, and we'll come back and we can kind of make some determination about that. That sound good?
Sounds good.
Bruce, anything else you want to bring up?
Timeline? Expectations?
Would everybody feel comfortable coming back a month from now with sort of a draft structure?
And it's going to be basically what what you just summarized.
Right, and again, there's some gray area right now, right? So I just
Right, so
described
we,
that
with
undivided.
yours,
with
it's
property.
a loophole area, so we'll just deal with yours by itself.
Well, you know, like I said, I'm okay with it because this is my real first STR.
With October cycle, I would like for the planning commission to have a cycle. We all have the time for.
So come back to this body in October rather than September.
Is that?
That acceptable to
You're
everybody?
the man, Bruce. I'm looking at you.
I'm thinking through, that actually means like we got to pull this together in 2 weeks.
If it comes back to us in October.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking coming back to like a work session in October.
Oh.
If you want the planning
To
commission
where we have
feedback
sort of
for
a
the work
draft or a
session, yeah.
framework.
Because like, it was their suggestion, right? So shouldn't we get the planning commission feedback?
I think we want more feedback. It's just, I mean, I've been listening to all those things. It's just going in circles, so.
I think planning commission kind of said they were done with it. They want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's us put a framework together. I mean, that ultimately, if the non-licensure piece needs to be baked into planning and zoning code, Title IX, they're obviously going to have to look at the fine details of the text of it on law and pass that on to us. But let's come back October to this seat, this table, and have a framework that we can move forward. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Motion.
I'm going to adjourn, and there's a second, all in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.